Chapter 2992. In a Valley. What do you mean by whispering sweet nothings to each other? Can you watch what you say? Yarou Xiangjuan's pretty face changed slightly. The fatty in front of her was simply shooting his mouth off. In the door of darkness, she was clearly just chatting with Zhuowen. How could this fatty say that they were whispering sweet nothings to each other? This was too much of a distortion of the truth. Oh. So you two aren't in that kind of relationship? Then I might have guessed wrong. Hey. Ma Yujie laughed mischievously, not looking like he was apologizing at all. His eyes narrowed mischievously. Yarou Xiangjuan's pretty face turned pale when she saw the fatty reveal such a wretched smile, but she didn't flare up. In fact, she didn't know much about Long Wen. They hadn't spent much time together, so she didn't know who Long Wen's friends were. The fatty in front of her could accurately say Long Wen's name, and even took out the billion-mile escape talisman to give them. Yarou Xiangjuan actually believed that the fatty was Long Wen's friend. After all, how could an outsider give them such a precious talisman for no reason, and even mention their names? Obviously, even if the fatty wasn't Long Wen's friend, he should know Long Wen. Of course, if Yarou Xiangjuan knew that the billion-mile escape talisman Ma Yujie gave them was a fake, who knew if she would be so angry that she would directly strike the fatty to death? All right. I was wrong about what I said just now. Long Wen didn't say such things. This time, the gear zone is very dangerous, so you two should be careful. I'll give you these billion-mile escape talismans so that you can have some life-saving means. Ma Yujie's face suddenly became serious. He waved his hand and forcibly stuffed the two talismans into Yarou Xiangjuan and Jiang Qisheng's hands. Thank you, fellow Daoist. Since fellow Daoist is Brother Long's friend, you're naturally our friend too. We still don't know fellow Daoist's name. Jiang Qisheng put away the talismans Ma Yujie gave him, and his expression eased a lot. He cupped his hands and said to Ma Yujie. Yarou Xiangjuan took the talismans Jiang Qisheng handed over. Her originally somewhat ugly expression also calmed down a lot. However, Yarou Xiangjuan didn't talk to Ma Yujie. Although the fatty was Long Wen's friend, his words were a little frivolous, which made her unhappy. At the same time, Yarou Xiangjuan was also a little surprised in her heart. Long Wen was such a calm person, how could he have such a friend? Ma Yujie smiled and said, I'm called Ma Yujie, you guys can just call me Brother Ma. I still have to wait here for Long Wen. Are you going to wait with me, or do you want to go in? Yarou Xiangjuan and Jiang Qisheng shook their heads. Jiang Qisheng said, Junior sister Yarou and I plan to go in and have a look. There must be more than just the ancestral sorcerer's body. There must be other things. Although the two of us aren't very strong and it will be difficult for us to fight for the body of the ancestral shaman, it shouldn't be difficult for us to find the other treasures inside. Moreover, with Brother Ma's 100 million miles talisman, we can be considered to have one more life-saving trump card. Ma Yujie nodded and pretended to be gratified. You're right to think that way. By the way, Brother Ma, Brother Long went to another place. Before he left, he told us to come here first and he will come later. Why don't you come with me to the gear zone? The three of us can take care of each other. Jiang Qisheng seemed to have thought of something and said to Ma Yujie. A strand of bright light flashed in the depths of Ma Yujie's eyes as he said in a low voice, Long Wen did indeed tell me that he wanted to go to a place to look for something. I originally wanted to help him. Unfortunately, he said that place was very dangerous and told me not to go. Moreover, he refused to tell me where it was no matter what. Long Wen has always been like this. Every time he encounters something, he has to deal with it alone. Since I'm his friend, isn't it natural for me to help him? Hearing this, Jiang Qisheng and Yarou Xiangjuan both looked ashamed. Although they boasted that they were Long Wen's friends, when Zhuowen told them to leave first, they didn't think that Zhuowen might be in danger, so they didn't say anything about leaving. On the contrary, the seemingly unreliable fatty in front of them was obviously more concerned about Long Wen than they were, which made them feel a little ashamed. Brother Long didn't tell us before that the place he went to was dangerous. How about this, let's go to Brother Long's place and take a look. Maybe we can help, Jiang Qisheng said somewhat shamefully. Ma Yujie shook his head and said, no need. I understand Long Wen's character. If you go and return, he will definitely be angry. It's more appropriate for me to go. You two go into the gear zone first. Jiang Qixing and Yarou Shengjuan hesitated, but when they thought of Long Wen's instructions, they really didn't need to rush over to help Long Wen. After all, if Long Wen needed their help, he would have told them before they parted. However, the unreliable fatty in front of them was obviously not simple. He could easily give out 2 billion mile talismans, so his wealth was definitely not low. His strength was definitely not weak either. If this fatty were to go and help Long Wen, it might be the most suitable choice. Then I'll leave it to you, Brother Ma. We don't know where Brother Long went, but before we left, I looked back and saw that Brother Long went in that direction. After Jiang Qixing finished speaking, he pointed in a direction and said to Ma Yujie, "Thank you very much. You two must be careful when you enter the gear zone. I'll go and help Long Wen first. When he's done, we'll rush over." Ma Yujie cupped his hands at Jiang Qixing, then turned into a stream of light and rushed in the direction Jiang Qixing pointed. Soon, he disappeared from Jiang Qixing and Yarou Shengjuan's sight. Roar. A deafening roar came from the front. The dark creature that had been leading the way suddenly stopped. Zhuowen, who had been following behind the dark creature, also stopped. He immediately walked to the dark creature's side and found that there was a valley in front of him. The moment Zhuowen stood at the entrance of the valley, his body trembled, and his eyes revealed a look of surprise. This was because the scenery of the valley in front of him was too out of place with this grey area. The valley in front of him was lush and verdant, with green grass like a cushion. In the center of the valley, there was actually a rather large lake. The water of the lake was clear and green. From afar, it looked like a polished emerald, crystal clear and beautiful. Such a beautiful scenery was rare even in the outside world. He actually saw such a beautiful valley in this desolate and boundless grey area. This was really a bit too abrupt. Gong Gong's Jiu worm is in this valley. Chapter 2993. Gong Gong Jiu bug. The dark creature nodded and transmitted its voice to Jian Wushuang. "You are a divine formation master. You should be able to tell why the scenery in this valley is so different from the surroundings." Zhuowen remained silent. The moment he saw the valley, he knew that someone must have set up some kind of powerful formation in the valley. That was why the valley had such a pleasant scenery. Moreover, he knew that the person who set up the formation must be Gong Gong. This was because the method used to set up the formation in the valley was basically the same as the formation used to seal the dark creatures. They were both created by the same person. So, the Gong Gong Jiu bug should be at the bottom of the lake, right? Zhuowen said calmly. He slowly stepped out and made a gesture with his right hand, summoning beast bone formation discs one after another. In just a few breaths, Zhuowen broke the restriction at the entrance of the valley, and Zhuowen easily entered the valley. Gong Gong's formation skills were not high, so Zhuowen broke it too easily. Zhuowen was sure that the Gong Gong Jiu bug was at the bottom of the lake because the 3 Jiu bugs in Pangu sacred body sensed it. You guessed right. My master's Jiu bug is sealed at the bottom of the seal. However, I have to remind you that my master's Jiu bug has been corroded by evil thoughts. It has lost its mind, and its power is even more terrifying than before. Before you break the seal, I think you'd better be mentally prepared. The dark creature looked at the green lake in front of him with fear in its eyes. It reminded Zhuowen. Zhuowen could tell from the dark creature's expression that the Gong Gong Jiu bug that had been corroded by evil thoughts was definitely more terrifying than the dark creature. Thinking of this, Zhuowen's eyes became serious. However, he did not plan to give up. His Pangu sacred body had reached the bottleneck long ago. He had been stuck at the peak of the 5-star level for some time. If he could absorb the Gong Gong Jiu bug this time, he would definitely advance to the 6-star Pangu sacred body. If he could advance to the 6-star Pangu sacred body, his strength would increase by a lot. By then, although he might not be a match for Senki Yin, who was at the early stage of the reaching heaven level, it was still impossible for Senki Yin to kill him in one move. He would be able to protect himself. Thinking of this, Zhuowen came to the edge of the lake and immediately jumped into the bottom of the lake. The dark creature stood on the shore and looked at Zhuowen, who disappeared at the bottom of the lake, with a complicated look. He was editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. If translation, Translation. Should he translation? Translation. If translation. If translation. Translation. If translation. If translation. If translation, he was translation. Translation. Or translation. If translation. Translation. Is translation. Translation. If translation. 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 If translation. Translation. If translation. Translation. The dark creature made up his mind. He was not in a hurry to leave because he had a feeling that this human was not simple. When he had fought with this human, he had felt the aura of the wizard ancestor on him. To be more precise, it was the aura of the wizard ancestor's GU bug. Although it was different from the aura of his master's GU bug, the essence of the wizard ancestor's GU bug was the same. In other words, this mysterious human had other wizard ancestors' GU bugs. The reason why this human was looking for GU bugs was probably because he had something that needed the wizard ancestor's GU bug. Perhaps this human really had a way to subdue the GU bug. While the dark creature was waiting on the shore, Zhuowen continued to go deeper into the lake. Although the lake water was clear and green, it was extremely cold. The moment Zhuowen entered the lake, his body could not help but tremble. The moment Zhuowen entered the lake, he was extremely cautious. He was afraid that a powerful creature would suddenly appear in the lake. However, as he continued to go deeper, he realized that he was safe and unobstructed. Nevertheless, the deeper Zhuowen went, the more he felt that something was wrong. This was because he realized that the lake seemed to be bottomless. He had been sinking for about half a day, but he still had not reached the bottom of the lake. Hey, that's... After sinking for a few more hours, Zhuowen took a closer look and saw a green barrier not far from his left. The green barrier was in the shape of a hexahedron. It was floating in the lake and was as tall as a few people. As the green barrier's color was almost the same as the lake water, Zhuowen did not notice it at first. He only noticed it when he got closer. Zhuowen landed at the edge of the green barrier and saw a thumb-sized bug floating in the barrier. It was motionless as if it was frozen. This bug was dark blue. At the bottom of the lake, it emitted a faint blue light. Its appearance was sharp and its surface was covered with sharp spikes. It looked very ferocious. Zhuowen felt an extremely strong water element aura from this bug. He knew that this bug should be the GU that Gong Gong had sealed here. Zhuowen waved out beast bone array discs and formed a seal with both hands. At the same time, he used the profound primordial everlasting to break the green barrier. In less than 10 breaths of time, the green barrier was destroyed. The little bug that was originally motionless within the barrier trembled and opened its scarlet eyes. Roar. The little bug actually let out a beast-like roar. Immediately after, it shot out violently and charged towards Zhuowen with monstrous killing intent. Wherever this GU worm passed, the entire lake water boiled, forming one terrifying storm after another in the water, wreaking havoc and exploding continuously. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and began to retreat. He felt that the GU was much stronger and more violent than the other GU he had encountered before. It seemed that the dark creature was right. This GU was indeed eroded by Gong Gong's evil thoughts. Otherwise, it would not have lost its mind and attacked everything it saw. However, the moment Zhuowen kept retreating, he found that the surrounding lake water seemed to have turned into palms that grabbed him and imprisoned his body. Obviously, the GU did not intend to let Zhuowen go. "You're courting death." Zhuowen snorted coldly and stopped retreating. Instead, he suddenly unleashed the power of the Pangu sacred body. 3 GU venomous insects shot out of his body and circled around him like the most loyal guards. The moment Zhuowen released the power of the Pangu sacred body, the Gong Gong GU worms slowed down abruptly, and their scarlet eyes showed a trace of surprise and doubt. The moment Zhuowen completely released the 3 GU worms in his body, the Gong Gong GU worm screeched. Its voice was filled with terror. Then, it turned around and began to flee. Chapter 2994. Subdue Zhuowen looked at the escaping Gong Gong GU worm and sneered. He followed closely behind. He would not let the Gong Gong GU worm escape. "Come here." Zhuowen waved his sleeve, and the 3 Gu worms around him suddenly shot out and blocked the Gonggong Gu worm's path. Hiss! Hiss! The Gonggong Gu worm hissed anxiously and immediately attacked the 3 Gu worms in front of it. Unfortunately, although the Gonggong Gu worm was strengthened by the evil thoughts and its strength surpassed other ancestral wizard Gu worms of the same level, it was blocked by 3 ancestral wizard Gu worms. Therefore, the Gonggong Gu worm could not break through the obstruction of the 3 Gu worms in a short time. When Zhuowen arrived, the Gonggong Gu worm barely broke through the blockade of the 3 Gu worms. Unfortunately, it was too late. Zhuowen had used the sky-splitting blade and heaven and earth dying together. The sky-splitting blade with destructive power swept out from Zhuowen's hand and swept towards the Gonggong Gu worm. The Gonggong Gu worm activated the power of the surrounding water and barely blocked the sky-splitting blade. However, it was also injured by the sky-splitting blade. When it wanted to escape again, Zhuowen had already rushed over and grabbed the Gonggong Gu worm with his right hand. The Gonggong Gu worm kept hissing and trying to resist Zhuowen. However, the Pangu sacred body's suppression on it was too terrifying. No matter how strong it was nothing in front of the Pangu sacred body. Zhuowen easily slapped the Gonggong Gu worm away, and the huge force made the Gu worm fall to the bottom of the lake. The Gonggong Gu worm was very agile. The moment it fell to the bottom of the lake, it immediately got up and fled towards the surface of the lake. Zhuowen's next attack missed. With a thought, the 3 Gu worms not far away rushed out and chased after the Gonggong Gu worm. Zhuowen followed closely behind. On the shore of the lake, the dark creatures kept retreating. Their eyes flickered with fear as they looked at the turbulent lake with countless water columns. It seems that the human has already unsealed the Gu worm. The Gu worm that has been corrupted by its master's evil thoughts will not recognize me. When it comes out, I'm afraid the first person it will attack will be me. The dark creature felt a little helpless. It retreated once again and left the lake. It naturally hoped that the human would be able to subdue the Gu worm. After all, the Gu worm was a hot potato to it. Should I just leave now? Although that human is not simple, he might not be a match for the Gu worms. The dark creature hesitated. He was worried that Zhuowen wouldn't be a match for the Gu bug. If that happened, he would have to face the Gu bug alone. However, it was extremely indignant. If that human had truly subdued the Gu worm and it were to flee at the last minute, the latter would probably ignore it even if it wanted to ask him to bring it away from this place. Boom! Suddenly, a terrifying water column erupted from the lake in front of the dark creature. Then, a dark shadow rushed out of the lake at an extremely fast speed towards the dark creature. The dark creature's pupils shrank. The moment the dark shadow rushed out of the lake, it recognized that it was the Gu worm of Gonggong. Damn it, I really overestimated that human. It seems that he died at the bottom of the lake. I have to run. The dark creature cursed and retreated at the same time. However, it soon found that the Gu worm's eyes were filled with panic and fear. There was no sign of violence at all. Boom! While the dark creature was surprised, another water column erupted from the lake. Then, a figure rushed out of the lake and chased after the dark creature. This figure was Zhuowen. In front of Zhuowen, 3 Gu worms shot out like 3 imperceptible trajectories, chasing after the Gu worm of Gonggong. The Gu worm of Gonggong also noticed Zhuowen, who was chasing after it. It screeched and ignored the dark creature in front of it. It passed by the dark creature and ran for its life. Unfortunately, the Gu worm of Gonggong was soon caught by the 3 Gu worms again and intercepted. Zhuowen came right after. He waved his hand and slammed the Gu worm of Gonggong into the ground. Zhuowen's movements were not slow either. He descended from the sky and smashed down with his right palm, smashing onto the Gonggong Gu bug's body. He unleashed dozens of palm strikes at once, and the terrifying power caused the ground to tremble. The dark creature looked at this scene in a daze. The Gu worm of Gonggong, which it thought should be terrifying and invincible, was actually forced to flee in panic by this human. Now, it was being tortured by this human. This made the dark creature's face burn. After all, it had warned Zhuoan many times before that its master's Jiu worm was invaded by evil thoughts. Its power was terrifying, and this human's life was definitely in danger. Now, Zhuoan's actions were simply a slap to its face. Moreover, what made the dark creature even more incredulous was that this human actually had 3 other Jiu worms on him. These Jiu worms were all Jiu worms of ancestor sorcery. Was he still a human? How could he subdue so many Jiu worms of ancestor sorcery? Boom! Zhuoan slammed out the last palm. After discovering that the Jiu worm of Gong Gong had completely lost its resistance, he stopped. Then, he pinched the Jiu worm of Gong Gong in the pit with 2 fingers and formed a seal with his left hand. After imprisoning the Jiu worm of Gong Gong, he kept it in his macro world. The 3 Jiu worms around him, after receiving Zhuoan's order, all went back into Zhuoan's body. Zhuoan's gaze fell on the entrance of the valley. His gaze became extremely cold and unfriendly. "I know you're there. Don't hide. Come out." Zhuoan's voice was cold. Just now, when he was subduing the Jiu worm of Gong Gong, his divine sense accidentally scanned the entrance of the valley and discovered that there was a figure hiding behind the entrance. And for some reason, Zhuoan felt that this figure gave him a very familiar feeling. Because of this, the moment Zhuoan caught the Jiu worm of Gong Gong, he did not immediately refine it. Instead, he imprisoned it and put it in his macro world. The dark creature was shocked and looked at the entrance of the valley with some surprise. It was very confident in its sensitivity. Just now, it actually did not discover that there was someone at the entrance of the valley. Or could it be that this human was bluffing? Thump, thump, thump. The sound of footsteps could be heard. Then, a figure appeared behind the entrance. This was a young fatty with a big belly. The fatty was all smiles as he looked at Zhuoan, and very warmly said, "Brother Zhuo, what a coincidence, to actually meet you here. As always, we are fated to meet. It's you." The moment he saw the fatty in front of him, Zhuoan immediately guessed that this person should be Ma Yujie. He immediately felt a headache. "How did you know I was here?" Zhuoan asked in an unfriendly tone. Ma Yujie was very thick-skinned. He chuckled and said, "Brother Zhuoan, you misunderstood. I really happened to pass by and saw that the fight here was so intense. So, I came in to take a look out of curiosity. Then, I saw an acquaintance. It's you." Zhuoan did not bother with Ma Yujie at all. He said indifferently, "If there's nothing else, Brother Ma should leave first. By the way, my name is Long Wen now. Call me Brother Long." Chapter 2995. Heaven accessing place. You don't have to do that, Brother Ma. I can do it alone. I don't need anyone else's cooperation. Zhuoan's voice was cold. He didn't intend to cooperate with Ma Yujie. After all, he had cooperated with Ma Yujie many times. Most of the time, he was cheated. This time, he didn't intend to be cheated by the fat man again. Ma Yujie wasn't surprised. He waved his sleeve and took out a crystal-clear jade talisman. He made a gesture with his right hand and activated the jade talisman. The lines on the surface of the jade talisman emitted a blazing brilliance, and then many rays of light shot out. These rays of light projected into the void of space, projecting one image after another. Zhuoan glanced at the images and found that they were in a gear zone. In front of each image, there was a huge body that was faintly discernible. This body was extremely large. It rested at the very top, covering the sky and earth. The moment Zhuoan saw the figure, he narrowed his eyes. He guessed that this body was probably the body of ancestor sorcerer Gonggong, whom he was looking for in the Door of Darkness. But Zhuoan was puzzled. How could Ma Yujie have so many images of the gear zone from different angles and directions? It was as if this man had set up many surveillance formations in the gear zone. This gear zone is the only way to get to the body of ancestor sorcerer Gonggong. I have distributed hundreds of millions of talismans to every practitioner who enters this zone, and secretly set up a surveillance formation in each talisman. Even if I don't enter the gear zone, I can see which places are dangerous and which are safe. I can use the method of elimination to figure out the real path. Ma Yujie put away the jade talisman, and the images in the void disappeared. He looked at Zhuowen complacently and said, "Brother Long, it's beneficial for you to cooperate with me. Don't you agree?" Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and said indifferently, "Since you have designed everything, it seems that I can't interfere. It's unnecessary for you to cooperate with me." Zhuowen had a feeling that this fat man must have seen how he tamed Gong Gong's Jiu bug, and had guessed that it was Gong Gong's Jiu bug. Perhaps this was the reason why this fat man suddenly proposed to cooperate with him. Ma Yujie grinned and said, "The thing you tamed just now should have something to do with Gong Gong, right?" Zhuowen's face suddenly turned cold. Just as he was about to refuse, Ma Yujie's voice sounded in his mind, "Brother Zhuo, you don't have to be in such a hurry to refuse. That worm should be a Gong Gong Jiu worm, right? Also, I saw that when you subdued that Gong Gong Jiu worm, you also released 3 other worms. If I'm not wrong, those 3 worms should also be ancestral wizard Jiu worms. You've been collecting these things all these years. It should be related to your physical body, right? I think the Pangu sacred body is the only body-strengthening method that requires the use of ancestor Magus Jiu worms." As soon as Ma Yujie said this, Zhuowen's pupils shrank into needles. He turned his head and looked at Ma Yujie, who was smiling faintly in front of him, in disbelief. Both the ancestral wizard Jiu worm and the Pangu sacred body were things from a long time ago. In this era, there were very few people who knew about the Pangu sacred body and the ancestral wizard Jiu worm. If Zhuowen hadn't inherited the Pangu sacred body, he wouldn't have known about the Pangu sacred body and the ancestral wizard Jiu worm at all. However, the fat man in front of him said it so easily. Zhuowen felt that it was inconceivable. "Who the hell are you?" Zhuowen's face darkened, and he no longer hid the killing intent in his eyes. He stared coldly at Ma Yujie and asked. Ma Yujie had a faint smile on his face, but he didn't care about the killing intent in Zhuowen's eyes, nor did he answer Zhuowen's question directly. Instead, he said indifferently, "Brother Zhuo, I'm sure you've already guessed why I insist on cooperating with you. It's because you have the Pangu sacred body. You should be able to easily extract the essence blood of the ancestral wizard. And I happen to need this ability of yours. So, isn't it a win-win for us if we cooperate?" Zhuowen slowly walked towards Ma Yujie and said with killing intent, "Why should I cooperate with you? As long as I kill you, it'll be fine. No matter what your background is, as long as you're dead, nothing can threaten me." As he spoke, Zhuowen kicked with his right foot. His whole body burst out with a crystal-clear light, and an aura like that of an ancient savage beast came crushing over. Bang! Zhuowen punched Ma Yujie's face. He didn't hold back at all this time. His punch seemed to break the sky and the earth. It was very terrifying. Ma Yujie narrowed his eyes and a trace of coldness burst out. He also punched out, choosing to meet Zhuowen head-on. Rumble. When the 2 fists collided, the power that erupted was very terrifying. The whole ground cracked, and the void seemed to collapse. Thump, thump, thump. Zhuowen hurriedly retreated. Soon after, he saw Ma Yujie standing in front of him, quietly standing on the spot. At this moment, Ma Yujie no longer had the appearance of the fat man at the beginning. Instead, he was full of majesty. In particular, his eyes were filled with starlight, bright and deep. He stared straight at Zhuowen. "Brother Zhuo, I don't want to beat around the bush with you anymore. The essence blood of the ancestral wizard is very useful to me. If you cooperate with me, we will each get half of the essence blood." Ma Yujie's long hair moved without wind as he said lightly. Zhuowen stabilized his body and coughed out a mouthful of blood. He looked at Ma Yujie in front of him with great fear. At this moment, Ma Yujie gave him a very strange feeling. It was as if he was no longer facing the fat man in the past, but a complete stranger. "I can cooperate with you, but you need to tell me who you are." Zhuowen took a deep breath. The injuries on his body were quickly healed under the effect of the Gomang Jiu. He stood up and looked calmly at the fat man in front of him. He knew that Ma Yujie only came to cooperate with him. It was impossible for Ma Yujie to kill him. Ma Yujie's identity had always been a mystery to Zhuowen. When he was in the 8 heavens, he thought Ma Yujie came from the Xian Mi heavenly territory. Now that he had come to the Xian Mi heavenly territory, he found that Ma Yujie's origin was far from as simple as he had thought. Ma Yujie fell silent. After a while, he said lightly, "It is not good for you to know my origin. I don't think you need to know. I am very curious. I must know. If you don't tell me, our cooperation will be ruined." Zhuo Wen's tone was flat. Although he had fallen into a disadvantageous position in the exchange earlier, it was basically impossible for Ma Yujie to kill him completely. After all, he had quite a number of trump cards in his possession. When the time came, it was not certain who would be the one to kill who. Chapter 2996. Far Ancient, the Heaven Accessing Place? What's that? Zhuowen asked in confusion. The so-called Heaven Accessing Place is a micro-world. This micro-world is not ordinary. It was built by a group of powerful experts of the heaven-reaching realm. In the Heaven Accessing Place, experts of the human clan and the alien clan coexist, unlike the Xian-Mi Heavenly Domain and the Untainted Heavenly Domain, who fight against each other all year round, Ma Yujie said calmly. Zhuo Wen looked surprised. This was the first time he had heard about the Heaven Accessing Place, especially the heaven-reaching master of the human clan and the alien clan that Ma Yujie had mentioned. Why did they coexist in that small world? Why did these experts of the heaven-reaching realm live in the Heaven Accessing Place instead of in their own heavenly domains? You're surprised that these experts of the heaven-reaching realm don't live in their own heavenly domains, right? To tell you the truth, the Heaven Accessing Place was co-founded by experts of the human tribe and the alien tribe. It's not so much a micro-world as an organization that only belongs to the experts of the heaven-reaching realm. Any practitioner of the human tribe or the alien tribe who reaches the level of the heaven-reaching realm will receive an invitation to join the Heaven Accessing Place. Of course, this organization is very free. It doesn't restrict the freedom of its members. There are many experts who hold high positions in their own heavenly domains. For example, Senki Yin, the master of the 10 Extremes Yin Corpse sect, received an invitation not long ago after he became a heaven-reaching realm. Speaking of this, Ma Yujie deliberately paused for a while and continued, "And I remember that the old man of the 3 pure ones, who left the 8 heavens, should have directly returned to the Heaven Accessing Place. This old guy is not simple. He should also know that you have the Pangu sacred body. You'd better be careful." Zhuowen fell silent. After a while, he said, "So you're from the Heaven Accessing Place?" Ma Yujie sneered with a trace of disdain in his eyes. He said calmly, "I'm from the primitive age, a place you can never reach. That's all I can tell you. Even if I tell you more, you won't know. I think the Heaven Accessing Place should be enough to exchange for a chance to cooperate with you." Zhuowen took a deep look at Ma Yujie. He also saw the disdain and contempt in Ma Yujie's eyes. How could Ma Yujie show such disdain for the Heaven Accessing Place? Did he come from a place more mysterious than the Heaven Accessing Place? And the ancient times that Ma Yujie spoke of, what kind of place was that? "I agree to cooperate with you, but there is a condition. You must swear an oath to the Heavenly Tao." "I'm afraid you will cheat me when the time comes," Zhuowen said in a deep voice. Ma Yujie was a little speechless. He immediately swore an oath to the Heavenly Tao, and said, "This time, I'm sincerely cooperating with you, and I won't cheat. You don't have to be so careful. I've been tricked by you." Zhuowen glanced at Ma Yujie. After reaching an agreement with Ma Yujie, Zhuowen went to the place where Gonggong's body was kept. But before they left, the dark creature also intended to follow them. Ma Yujie was very dissatisfied with this, thinking that the beast was a burden. After knowing that the dark creature's purpose was to leave this place, Ma Yujie transmitted a thought to the dark creature. The dark creature happily rushed in a certain direction, no longer paying attention to Zhuowen. Zhuowen was speechless as he watched the dark creature leave. He turned to Ma Yujie and said, "Brother Ma, what did you say to the dark creature?" "I just told the beast where the exit was. Didn't it want to go out? Tell it to get out by itself. There's no need for it to follow us and drag us down." Ma Yujie shrugged. Zhuowen looked at Ma Yujie, speechless. They did know where the exit was. It was the door of darkness. But Zhuowen doubted whether the dark creature could pass through the door of darkness. After all, there were restrictions on entry and exit. But Zhuowen also knew that even if he left with the dark creature, they had to pass through the door of darkness. If the dark creature couldn't pass through the door of darkness, there was nothing he could do. Ma Yujie and Zhuowen were very decisive in their actions. They immediately rushed to the place where Gonggong's body was kept. On the way, Zhuowen looked at Ma Yujie and asked, "Brother Ma, aren't you afraid that someone will reach the place where Gonggong's body is and take it away before we do?" Ma Yujie said indifferently, "The body of the ancestral shaman is extremely terrifying. Even if he's dead, his body's strength is comparable to that of an early-stage ascension master. Unless someone has a ascension-level artifact. In my opinion, only a few Dao Palace forces can have a ascension-level artifact. The masters of those forces will temporarily hand over their ascension-level artifacts to the strongest geniuses who entered this time for safekeeping. That is to say, among this group of people, only top geniuses like the Saintess of the Phoenix people and Zhongli Haoyang can have such artifacts. And even if they use a ascension-level artifact, it will take a lot of effort to break open the body of the ancestral shaman. That is to say, even if they find the exit and reach there first, I'm afraid it will take a lot of effort to take the body." Zhuowen frowned and said, "What if they directly put Gonggong's body into their small world? Then they will bring it back to the sect and slowly study it to extract the blood essence of the ancestral shaman." Ma Yujie sneered and said, "The ancestral shaman is not an ordinary thing. There are very few dimensions that can store such a powerful being like the ancestral shaman. At least, I haven't seen one before. Unless it's a very high-grade ascension-level artifact, do you think forces like the Ten Extremities Yin Corpse sect and the Yin and Yang Divine sect will have such an artifact?" Zhuowen fell silent. Ma Yujie was right. Among all the artifacts, ascension-level artifacts were one of the rarest artifacts. The value of a ascension-level artifact was not something an ordinary ascension-level artifact could compare to. According to Zhuowen's knowledge, Dao Palace forces like the Ten Extremities Yin Corpse sect only had one ascension-level artifact, and that was the Yama's ghost portrait. Unfortunately, the Yama's ghost portrait was obtained by him. As for the other Dao Palace forces, they might not even have an Empyrean-level artifact. Even if they did, it would not be a very high-level artifact. As for Empyrean-level spatial artifacts, that was basically a joke. It was very unlikely that the average Dao Palace force would have one. "I wonder if my great world can subdue Gonggong." Zhuowen's eyes flickered. His great world had evolved from the Devourer King's inner world. Ever since his doppelganger cultivated the Pangu sacred body, his great world had been constantly evolving. It was also contaminated with the vast aura of the Pangu sacred body. Its grade was far higher than the small worlds of other cultivators. Chapter 2997. Heading to the gear zone, Ma Yujie said to Zhuowen, "You're different. You cultivate the Pangu sacred body and can easily extract the ancestral witch's blood essence. So, you don't need to take Gonggong's body with you. All you need to do is extract all of Gonggong's blood essence." Soon, the two of them arrived at the vast open space. Above the open space was the boundless gear zone. At the very top of the colorful gear, an incomparably huge body stretched across the void, blocking out the sun and the sky. Zhuowen glanced at the huge body and knew that it should be the body of ancestral witch Gonggong. "Come on, let's go in. I've thoroughly analyzed the images just now and have a rough understanding of the gear zone. We'll take fewer detours than others when we enter the gear zone." Ma Yujie took out the jade talisman and looked at the images for a while, then put it away and said to Zhuowen. However, Zhuowen stopped Ma Yujie. Looking at the latter's puzzled eyes, Zhuowen said, "My two friends should have been given the 100 million miles talisman by you, right?" Ma Yujie laughed dryly and nodded without saying anything. Zhuowen's eyes were calm as he said coldly, "And the 100 million miles talisman you gave us is probably a fake." It was not the first time he had dealt with Ma Yujie, so he knew what kind of character the fat man had. The 100 million miles talisman was a very precious escape talisman. Even for Dao Palace forces, it was quite precious. The fat man had given away so many of them in one go, which was a great loss. He had long suspected that the escape talismans given by the fat man were fake. After all, if they were real, The cost would be too high. Hee hee. Brother Zhuo, you know that the 100 million miles talisman is very precious. If I used the real one, wouldn't I lose a lot? So, Ma Yujie was very thick-skinned and did not feel embarrassed, so he admitted it openly. Zhuowen's eyes were gloomy as he said coldly, "Are you saying that the talismans you gave Brother Jiang and Sister Yarrow are fake? I can't be biased, right? Of course it's fake." Ma Yujie laughed dryly. Zhuowen flicked his sleeves and said coldly, "Now, bring out the images of Brother Jiang and Junior Marshal Sister Yao. I want to see their current situation. If they're in danger, I'll hold you responsible." Zhuowen knew very well that once a cultivator had the 100 million Li talisman, they would have enough confidence. If they encountered danger, they would not think of running away. Instead, they would take the risk. After all, in their opinion, with such a powerful escape talisman, their lives were no longer in danger. Naturally, they would want to give it their all. What they didn't know was that the escape talisman they obtained was a fake. Once their lives were at stake, they would use the fake escape talisman, and everything would be too late. Zhuowen naturally didn't want to care about other people's lives, but Jiang Qixing and Yarrow Shangjuan were his friends. Zhuowen couldn't ignore them, so he had to check on them first. Ma Yujie reluctantly brought out 2 images. They were the images of what Jiang Qixing and Yarrow Shangjuan were experiencing. Zhuowen found that Jiang Qixing and Yarrow Shangjuan were exploring a dangerous place with 2 other people. Zhuowen wasn't unfamiliar with the other 2 people. These 2 people were also 2 of the 5 great Avilders of the host region. They were a man and a woman. The man was the Void Palace's Shuchen Shen, and the woman was the Fallen Star Mountain's Xingjing. Speaking of which, when Jiang Qixing had introduced Zhuowen and said that Zhuowen had saved his life, Xingjing had looked disdainful. He had thought that Jiang Qixing was talking nonsense. After all, Zhuowen's cultivation aura was only that of the Lord of Mystery. Zhuowen didn't mind the attitude Xingjing had given him back then, because he knew that this was human nature. If it were him, and he didn't know a person's background, and only knew that the other party was the Lord of Profound Secrets, he naturally wouldn't believe that this person had any ability. What Zhuowen cared about now was that the dangerous place these 4 people had entered wasn't ordinary. Moreover, the 4 of them had encountered rather troublesome problems in this dangerous place. Xingjing and Yarrow Shangjuan were even injured. However, from the expressions of these 4 people, it could be seen that they didn't intend to retreat. Obviously, they had the billion-mile talisman, so they were very confident that they could retreat safely. "No, I have to warn them." Zhuowen took out a communication jade talisman and sent the information about the billion-mile talisman to Yarrow Shangjuan and Jiang Qixing. Then, he called Ma Yujie and the 2 of them entered the gear zone. Ma Yujie's face was full of reluctance. He knew that Zhuowen had entered this time to save his friends first, while he wanted to find Gong Gong's body first. However, he didn't raise any objections. After all, he was the one who'd taken out the fake billion-mile talisman, so he was responsible for it. Besides, he had to rely on Zhuowen to extract the ancestral shaman blood essence. He didn't know how to do it himself. In the depths of the gear zone, apart from the illusory gears of all shapes and sizes, there were also many dangerous places. Some of these places were large, while others were small, and all of them contained more or less danger. Generally speaking, those who could make it through these dangerous places would be able to obtain more or less good things. Jiang Qixing and Yarrow Shangjuan hadn't been in the gear zone for long when they ran into Shuchen Shun and Xingjing, who'd teamed up. Shuchen Shun and Xingjing had provided them with information that they'd found a dangerous place with a divine herb garden. The herbs inside were basically all creation-grade divine herbs, and there were even destination-grade divine herbs. This news moved Jiang Qixing and Yarrow Shangjuan, so the 4 of them teamed up to venture into the dangerous place. This was a dangerous place surrounded by sheer cliffs and precipitous cliffs. Jiang Qixing and the others walked through a narrow gorge. On both sides of the gorge were jagged rocks of strange shapes. It was extremely dangerous. At this moment, the 4 of them were exhausted from dealing with countless black shadows that swept over from the front of the gorge. Upon closer inspection, these black shadows were actually bats with glowing red eyes. There were simply too many of these red-eyed bats, and none of them were weak. Yarou Xiangjuan and Xingjing were careless and were injured. Even Jiang Qixing and Xu Chenshun, who were slightly stronger, felt the pressure and gradually couldn't hold on any longer. There are too many of these bats. I'm afraid we can't handle them all. Brother Jiang, let's retreat first. Xu Chenshun's forehead was covered in cold sweat as he spoke to Jiang Qixing. Jiang Qixing's gaze was somewhat unwilling, but he could only helplessly say, "It seems that it's impossible for us to enter the divine herb garden in the depths of the gorge. Let's retreat first." As he spoke, Jiang Qixing tossed out a sphere. The sphere instantly exploded, and a terrifying wave of fire swept out, engulfing the red-eyed bats at the very front. Then, Jiang Qixing and Xu Chenshun quickly retreated with Yarou Xiangjuan and Xingjing. However, as they retreated, Jiang Qixing and Yarou Xiangjuan's communication jade talismans lit up. The two of them immediately took out their communication jade talismans. When they saw it, their faces first lit up with joy, but soon a trace of gloom appeared in their eyes. Chapter 2998. Red-eyed Bat Yarou Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing's eyes flashed with a trace of anger because the message Zhuoan sent them was about the 100 million talismans Ma Yujie gave them. The 100 million mile talisman that Shuo Wen had mentioned was fake. Ma Yujie had set up a corresponding formation on an ordinary talisman and made it look like a 100 million mile talisman. The reason why he had given them the talisman was because he had set up a surveillance formation on the talisman. He was using them as free explorers. Moreover, the message also mentioned that Ma Yujie didn't just give out these two talismans. He gave them to both human and foreign cultivators. Junior sister Xingjing, senior brother Xu, do you have the 100 million talismans on you? Yarou Xiangjuan put away the communication jade talisman and looked at Xu Chenshun and Xingjing beside her with a grave expression. Xu Chenshun and Xingjing were taken aback and nodded subconsciously. Although these talismans were important, Yarou Xiangjuan wasn't an outsider. Since she asked, they naturally had no reason to hide it. Did a fatty give you the 100 million talismans when you were outside? Jiang Qixing asked with an ugly expression. Xu Chenshun and Xingjing looked at each other and realized that something was wrong. They nodded. We have them too. That fatty gave them to us. Jiang Qixing took out the 100 million talismans from his spirit ring. His voice became very strange. What? That fatty clearly said that they were the only two talismans he had. He gave them to us because of the forces behind us. How come you have them too? Xingjing asked in surprise. It's very simple. These talismans are fake, Jiang Qixing said and poured heavenly energy into the talisman. Suddenly, the talisman lit up with a white light and then collapsed. Jiang Qixing himself was still in the same place. He didn't fly away at all. It's really fake. Xu Chenshun and Xingjing frowned slightly and also activated the talismans they took out. They found that the talismans they took out were exactly the same as Jiang Qixing's. They all turned into white light and collapsed. After discovering that the talisman was fake, the four of them felt a wave of lingering fear in their hearts. Fortunately, they had retreated in advance and obtained such important information. Otherwise, they might really have rushed into the depths of the canyon without caring about the consequences. After all, they had millions of talismans on them. With the 100 million mile talisman, they were not afraid of danger at all. Unless their lives were in danger, they could use the 100 million mile talisman to escape. However, their 100 million miles talisman was fake. If they really risked their lives to enter the danger zone and disregarded the cost, they would really be out of luck once they encountered a life-threatening situation. Thinking of this, their bodies trembled, and fear appeared in their eyes. Let's go back first. This is not a good place either. Xingjing's beautiful eyes revealed a hint of fear. She began to retreat and suggested to the others. Now that we don't have the escape talismans to save our lives, staying here isn't a good idea. Let's get out of here, Xu Chenshun said decisively. The four of them reached an agreement and returned to where they came from. However, what they didn't see was that in the depths of the canyon, a pair of incomparably huge scarlet eyes slowly appeared and coldly stared at the four of them as they left. Along the way, Xingjing looked at Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qisheng curiously and asked, "Brother Jiang, junior sister Yao, how did you know that we also had the 100 million-mile talisman and that it was fake?" Yao Xiangjuan smiled and said, "A friend of mine sent us a message and told us." "Which friend is it?" "His message helped us a lot," Shu Chen Shen hurriedly said. "His Long Wen. You should have seen him when he entered the door of darkness." Jiang Qisheng smiled. "It's him." Xingjing's beautiful eyes widened. Xingjing had a deep impression of Long Wen. When Jiang Qisheng first came to the door of darkness, she had seen Long Wen when she came out to greet him. However, Long Wen's aura was too weak. He was only the Lord of Mystery. Back then, when Jiang Qisheng said that Long Wen had saved them from Yi Hanfei, she didn't believe him and thought that Jiang Qisheng was deliberately saying that to elevate Long Wen. However, later, Long Wen easily defeated Cao Kangcheng and suppressed Eldam Da of the Merfolk clan in the Yin and Yang Divine Sects team, which changed her opinion of him a lot. She knew that this wasn't a simple task. Of course, Xingjing still felt a little ashamed. If she had known that Long Wen was a genuine genius, her previous disdain and contempt for him would have been too laughable. Just as Xingjing's thoughts were running wild, a deafening shriek rang out from the depths of the canyon and went straight to their eardrums, as if it wanted to shatter their ears. Jiang Qisheng, Yao Xiangjuan, Shu Chen Shen, and Xingjing's expressions changed drastically. They couldn't help but cover their ears and release their divine senses to investigate the source of the sound. The four of them immediately trembled in fright and used their movement techniques to flee out of the canyon. In their divine senses, a pair of incomparably huge scarlet eyes were rapidly approaching from the depths of the canyon. As the pair of scarlet eyes approached, an aura that made them feel fear came crushing down, making them feel as if they were facing the might of the heavens. This exotic beast is very terrifying. It's at least a peak creator. The four of us aren't a match for it even if we join forces. Run. The moment Jiang Qisheng sensed the terrifying aura, he was shocked and hurriedly transmitted a message to the other three. Of course, even without Jiang Qisheng's reminder, the other three also knew how terrifying the exotic beast behind them was and used their movement techniques to flee for their lives. As the shriek got closer and closer, it became more and more deafening. Jiang Qisheng and the other three's divine senses finally saw the true appearance of the exotic beast chasing behind them. It was an extremely huge red-eyed bat. It was hundreds of feet long and almost filled most of the canyon. Around this huge red-eyed bat, there were countless smaller red-eyed bats. These bats were like the most loyal guards, guarding this huge red-eyed bat. The huge red-eyed bat suddenly roared, and the densely packed smaller red-eyed bats immediately echoed it and flew out at an extremely fast speed, catching up to Jiang Qisheng and the other three in an instant. Bang bang bang! After these smaller red-eyed bats caught up to Jiang Qisheng and the other three, they exploded. The power of the explosion spread into the four's bodies, causing their speed to drop significantly. These little bats are burning their essence blood to increase their speed. They're using their lives to hinder us. Chapter 2999. Rescue everyone, don't hold back. Take out your trump cards, or you'll die here today. Shu Chen Shen narrowed his eyes, revealing a trace of ruthlessness. With a wave of his sleeve, a divine sword glowing with grey light appeared in his hand. The surface of the divine sword was covered with dense patterns, and as it flickered with grey light, it was difficult to distinguish the color of the divine sword from the surrounding void. It was as if the divine sword had merged with the surrounding void. Shu Chen Shen roared and slashed out with the divine sword. Suddenly, the void in front of him distorted. An illusory sword ray appeared in the distorted void and suddenly swept out. Everywhere it passed, the small red-eyed bats behind it were all crushed into powder by the illusory sword ray. The moment Shu Chen Shen used his trump card, Xingjing was not to be outdone. She took out a disc covered in starlight and waved it. Starlight spread out like the sharpest hidden weapon in the world. Any bat that was hit by the starlight screamed and exploded into a bloody mist. Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qisheng each took out a blue long sword. Jiang Qisheng also took out a divine sword, but Jiang Qisheng's divine sword was wider and heavier. The two of them swung their swords at the same time, splitting the sky and earth. The four of them used all their trump cards and killed all the small bats behind them in just a few breaths. After doing all this, just as the four of them were about to continue their escape, a terrifying gale swept over them like a whistling meteor. Their expressions changed slightly, and they all took out their trump cards and divine weapons to block in front of them. Bang! The four of them were all knocked back by the gust of wind. Among them, Yarou Shangjuan and Xingjing, who were already injured, spat out a mouthful of blood. Their injuries worsened. Jiang Qixing and Xu Chenshen supported Yarou Shangjuan and Xingjing and wanted to continue fleeing, but they found that their way back was blocked by countless small red-eyed bats. It would take them some time to break through so many small red-eyed bats. But now, they clearly did not have that much time, because the enormous red-eyed bat had already landed in front of them. A pair of scarlet eyes stared straight at the four of them. The four of them could see intense greed and desire in its eyes. It was obvious that the giant bat saw the four of them as its prey. Boom! The giant bat shrieked, and its huge wings were like the sharpest blades in the world, sweeping towards the four of them. The four of them had no choice but to use their trump cards to block in front of them, hoping to block the giant bat's attack. Bang bang bang! The giant bat attacked without any regard for its life. In an instant, it blasted out nearly 100 attacks, causing the four of them to be in an extremely sorry state. It was very difficult for them to resist. In addition to the giant bats, the surrounding small bats were also attacking without any regard for their lives, causing the pressure on the four of them to increase sharply. We can't go on like this. Are we going to die here today? Xingjing's face was incomparably pale. She struggled to urge the heavenly energy in her body. The starlight on the disc in her hand became even more resplendent, resisting the attacks of the countless bats in the surroundings. Xu Chenshen smiled bitterly, but he fell silent. His heart was also filled with despair. This was definitely a hopeless situation. At least for him, he did not have the ability to escape from this terrifying situation. The final result was that he would be exhausted to death by these suicidal bats. Don't be discouraged, the two of you. Let's hold on a little longer. Brother Long will be here soon to save us. Jiang Qixing's eyes were bright. He and Yarou Shangjuan had already received a message from Zhuoan and knew that Zhuoan was rushing towards them. Even though the giant bat before them was extremely powerful and wasn't any weaker than a pinnacle god of creation, they were still filled with confidence in Zhuowen. It should be known that Zhuowen was an existence that had even killed Sauron of the Merfolk clan. His strength definitely surpassed the majority of god of creation powerhouses. As long as Zhuowen could arrive, they would be saved. Xu Chenshen smiled bitterly. Brother Jiang, you are too optimistic. Long Wen does have some strength, but even if he comes, he will only add another corpse to the pile. Not to mention the huge number of red-eyed bats around us, just this 1,000-foot-long Bat King's strength is already at the pinnacle of the Creator realm. Together with these smaller bats, it's probably able to fight against a half-step Creator realm expert. Long Wen can't possibly be a match for these bats. Xu Chenshen and Xingjing both looked dejected. They had not counted on the Long Wen mentioned by Jiang Qixing. We believe in Brother Long. As long as we hold on a little longer, we will be able to wait for Brother Long to arrive. Yarou Shangjuan and Jiang Qixing's eyes were filled with determination. Xu Chenshen and Xingjing had no choice but to hold on to a hopeless situation and fight side by side with Yarou Shangjuan and Jiang Qixing against the attacks around them. At this moment, two uninvited guests had arrived outside the canyon. One was a youth with 2 scars on his face and the other was a pot-bellied fatty. They should be inside the canyon. Let's go in. That's right, Brother Ma, you have to call me Long when in front of outsiders. Don't mention my real name. Zhuowen glanced at the canyon and planned to enter, but before entering, he reminded Ma Yujie about his fake name. Ma Yujie naturally promised that he wouldn't spill the beans. Soon after, he reluctantly followed Zhuowen into the canyon. We can't hold on much longer. It looks like we really won't be able to escape this time. Xingjing spat out a mouthful of blood, her pretty face drained of color. The starlight disk in her hand had become extremely dim and was no longer as resplendent as it was at the beginning. Not only Xingjing, but Yarou Shangjuan was also not much better off. Her hair was disheveled and countless cracks had appeared on the divine sword in her hand. Although Jiang Qixing and Xu Chenshun were in a better state, they were not much better off. They had both suffered heavy injuries. Crack. Finally, a soft cracking sound rang out. Their combined defense was completely shattered, and the four of them spat out mouthfuls of blood and were sent flying. Swoosh, swoosh. The moment they were sent flying, the surrounding bats enveloped the four of them like a wave. They bared their sharp fangs and intended to suck their blood essence. Bang, bang, bang. However, just as the bat swarm engulfed the four of them, an extremely powerful saber ray came from behind them. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The saber ray contained an unparalleled domineering intent, and the sweeping bat swarm was instantly shredded to pieces by the saber ray. A figure quickly swept over and finally stopped in front of Jiang Qixing, Yarou Xiangjuan, Xing Jing, and Xu Chenshun. Chapter 3000. Pursuit. Brother Ma, help me take care of them first. I'll deal with these beasts first. The man instructed the pot-bellied fatty behind him. Then, with a stomp of his right foot, he rushed toward the giant bat. He grabbed at the air with both hands, and two giant white blades appeared in his hands. They possessed a terrifying power that could shake the heavens and earth. When the giant bat saw that its descendants had been killed so cleanly, a terrifying killing intent burst out of its eyes. With a sharp cry, it pounced toward Zhuowen. Zhuowen was not afraid. Holding the sky-splitting blades with both hands, he ruthlessly collided with the giant bat. Bang, bang, bang. In an instant, Zhuowen and the giant bat engaged in a fierce battle. The terrifying aftermath of the battle spread out, distorting the surrounding void, causing the sky to fall and the earth to crack. The canyon shook. Zhuowen exclaimed softly. He realized that the giant bat was not weak. It was strong enough to fight against a half-step creation lord. In an instant, it suppressed him. The giant bat was also shocked by the strength of the human in front of it. It was not killed in a single exchange. It's you. On Ma Yujie's side, Yarou Xiangjuan, Jiang Qixing, Xing Jing, and Xu Chenshun glared at him when they saw that the person in front of them was the fatty who had given them the talisman. Facing their angry gazes, Ma Yujie was very thick-skinned and did not feel embarrassed at all. He coughed dryly and said indifferently, I'm Long Wen's friend. Since Long Wen handed you over to me, I naturally have to take good care of you. All right, stay away for now. With that, Ma Yujie waved his sleeve. Jiang Qixing and the other three involuntarily floated up and retreated to a safe distance with Ma Yujie. Jiang Qixing and the other three's expressions changed slightly. They looked at Ma Yujie with extreme fear. Although the four of them were seriously injured, it was not to the extent that they could not resist. However, when the fat man waved his sleeve, the power that surged out made them unable to resist at all. They could only be led away by him. It was clear that the fatty's strength was not ordinary. Even if the four of them were at their peak, they might not necessarily be a match for the fatty in front of them. Thinking of this, deep fear appeared in their eyes. Ma Yujie, since you are Brother Long's friend, why did you give us the fake billion-mile talisman? As a friend, are you going to harm your friend's friend like this? Yarou Xiangjuan snorted coldly. Ma Yujie's expression was natural as he said, I'm the one who gave it to you, but whether you accept it or not is up to you. Did I force you to give it to me? Didn't I just give you a talisman? Was there a need to be so serious? I didn't harm your lives. But you almost got us killed. If we didn't believe in the talisman you gave us, we wouldn't have entered such a dangerous place. This completely messed up our plan to enter this dangerous place. If Brother Long hadn't appeared in time, I'm afraid we would have died here, Jiang Qixing said with an unkind expression. Ma Yujie shrugged and said, if you want to vent your anger on me, I don't care. If any of you are unhappy, you can take revenge on me. I won't stop you. You, shameless. Xing Jing's beautiful eyes glared, thinking that this fatty was too thick-skinned. They could see that this fatty was stronger than them, and they were seriously injured. Asking them to take revenge on him was just courting death. Since you don't plan to take revenge on me, then it's settled. Anyway, you were all saved by us in time. Everyone is happy. Don't think about these unhappy things. Thinking too much will only make you worry. Ma Yujie shook his head and said. Jiang Qisheng and the others glared at him, but there was nothing they could do. This fatty was too thick-skinned and too shameless. Even if they condemned him, this fatty probably wouldn't feel guilty. Ah! Look, Long Wen is being suppressed by the bat. Xing Jing suddenly cried out, attracting the attention of the others. Jiang Qisheng and Yaro Xiangjuan immediately looked worried. This time, Zhuowen came for them. If Zhuowen was injured because of them, they would feel guilty. At this moment, on the battlefield, Zhuowen was indeed being suppressed by the bat with the sky-splitting blade in his hand. This red-eyed bat's strength was roughly at the half-step creator realm, but its physical body was extremely terrifying. Zhuowen was indeed at a disadvantage in a head-on clash. Of course, if Zhuowen used the Huyi godly arrow, he could get rid of this red-eyed bat. However, there were outsiders here now, so Zhuowen naturally couldn't use this trump card so easily. Brother Ma, take them out of here first. I'll be right behind you. Zhuowen instructed Ma Yujie and transmitted his voice to Jiang Qisheng and the others, telling them to leave with Ma Yujie first and that he would be right behind them. Jiang Qisheng and the others also knew that the current situation was critical. Although Zhuowen was at a disadvantage, it didn't seem like his life was in danger. Therefore, they left with Ma Yujie first. After seeing Ma Yujie leave with Jiang Qisheng, Yaro Xiangjuan, and the others, Zhuowen heaved a sigh of relief and looked coldly at the red-eyed bat that was fighting desperately in front of him. I had a great time beating you up just now. It's my turn now. Zhuowen smiled wickedly. Then, with a wave of his sleeve, he took out the Huyi godly bow and the Genesis divine arrow from his great world. Zhuowen held the bow in his left hand and knocked the Genesis divine arrow on the bowstring in his right hand. Zhuowen didn't plan to take out the Huyi godly arrow. In his opinion, this red-eyed bat wasn't worthy of him using the Huyi godly arrow. Boom! Zhuowen pulled the bowstring back to 2/3 of its original length. The terrifying killing intent was like a falling mountain. It was very frightening. The red-eyed bat immediately sensed this terrifying killing intent. A trace of fear appeared in its scarlet eyes as it stared fixedly at Zhuowen. To be more precise, it was staring at the Huyi godly bow in Zhuowen's hand. It felt the fear of death from it. Whoosh! Zhuowen released the bowstring. The surface of the divine arrow was suddenly filled with a terrifying blood-red light. Then, it turned into a streak of blood-red light and shot into the sky. It was extremely fast as it swept towards the red-eyed bat. The red-eyed bat felt the threat of death. It screeched and gathered all the small bats around it in front of it, forming a powerful meat shield. Puff! Puff! Unfortunately, the meat shield formed by the small bats couldn't withstand a single blow. It was pierced through by the divine arrow. Puff! The divine arrow was too fast. After piercing through the meat shield, it disappeared in front of the red-eyed bat. The red-eyed bat gathered all the energy in its body, hoping to block the divine arrow. But in the end, it failed. In the end, the divine arrow pierced into the red-eyed bat's body and exploded with terrifying energy. The red-eyed bat screeched and exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Zhuowen waved his right hand and collected the scattered divine arrow. Just as he was about to return, he found that the cloud of blood mist was condensing and reforming into the giant red-eyed bat. After the red-eyed bat reformed, it screeched again and fled into the depths of the canyon. Bastard, do you think you can escape? Chapter 3001. Solve. In the gloomy canyon, strange rocks were everywhere and the terrain was steep. Zhuowen sped through the canyon. Looking at the red-eyed bat in front of him that he could not catch up with, his face turned ugly. The red-eyed bat had used a secret technique to reconstruct its body. The side effects were not small, and it was even slower than Zhuowen. However, the red-eyed bat was too familiar with the canyon's terrain. It flew left and right, and every turn was beyond Zhuowen's expectations. Every time Zhuowen was about to catch up, he would discover that the red-eyed bat would take another turn. Even Zhuowen did not expect that turn, allowing the red-eyed bat to easily shake off Zhuowen. Bastard, let's see how long you can run. Zhuowen stomped his feet and actually used the space-time ability. His entire body was like a ghost, flashing and flying in the void. His speed was extremely fast, leaving only afterimages in the void. Every time his afterimages appeared and disappeared, there would be slight ripples in the void. As Zhuowen continued to flash, the distance between Zhuowen and the red-eyed bat was constantly shortening. Hiss! The red-eyed bat also discovered that Zhuowen had suddenly sped up behind it. It hissed, and there was a trace of fear in its voice. However, very quickly, the red-eyed bat's eyes revealed a determined look. Soon after, its wings lit up with a bloody light, and the former's speed suddenly soared. It's actually burning its blood essence. Zhuowen frowned slightly. The red-eyed bat's wings suddenly lit up with a terrifying red light. It was the sign of burning its blood essence. The red-eyed bat's speed was not slow. Now that it was burning its blood essence, its speed was even faster. Even if Zhuowen used the space-time ability, it would be difficult to catch up to the beast. However, Zhuowen also knew that the red-eyed bat would not be able to hold on for long after burning its blood essence. In addition, he was already deep into the canyon. If he were to retreat like this, it would not be worth it. Several hours later, the red-eyed bat let out a miserable cry and fell into the depths of the canyon. It landed on a sharp stone pillar, and the stone pillar was completely dyed blood red. Zhuowen stopped not too far away from the stone pillar. He indifferently looked at the red-eyed bat on the blood-stained stone pillar. He did not attack, because he could see that the red-eyed bat would not be able to live for long. After all, it had burned its blood essence too much. It could not even suppress the injuries on its body. Let me send you on your last journey. Zhuowen waved his sleeve and a blade of air shot out, smashing into the red-eyed bat's body and finishing it off. After dealing with the red-eyed bats, Zhuowen's gaze fell on the back of the stone pillar. There was a huge cave there. The cave was shaped like the mouth of a ferocious beast. Two sharp stone pillars lined up on both sides of the cave, looking like the teeth of a giant beast. This should be the deepest part of the canyon, and this cave should be the nest of the red-eyed bat. Brother Jiang sent me a message saying that there is a divine herb garden in the depths of the canyon. It should be in this nest. Zhuowen muttered to himself. He took out a communication jade talisman and sent a message to Jiang Qixing, Ma Yujie, and the others. He told them that he had dealt with the red-eyed bat, and then strode into the cave. There were almost no more red-eyed bats in the outermost area of the canyon. Ma Yujie led Jiang Qixing and the others to stand under a huge rock. They silently waited for Zhuowen's return. That red-eyed bat is not simple. I wonder if Brother Long can escape from it. Yarou Xiangjuan was still a little worried. Jiang Qixing hurriedly comforted her. Brother Long is very strong. He is not an ordinary person. Perhaps he is not a match for the red-eyed bat, but escaping from it should not be a problem. But Xingjing shook her beautiful head slightly and said, "You all are too optimistic, right? If the red-eyed bat burns its blood essence, its strength will increase. At that time, whether Long Wen can escape or not is still a question." Yarou Xiangjuan and Jiang Qisheng looked displeased. They looked at Xingjing. Xingjing also realized that she had said something wrong and hurriedly shut her mouth. "Ha, with Brother Long's strength, he should be able to destroy that red-eyed bat." Ma Yujie, who had been silent all this time, spoke. He looked at the four people with a trace of mockery in his eyes. These people did not know how terrifying Zhuowen was, but Ma Yujie knew very well that a person who cultivated the Pangu sacred body was destined to be extraordinary. Moreover, Ma Yujie also knew that Zhuowen had other trump cards. It would not be difficult for him to kill a strange beast that was not even a creation lord. Jiang Qisheng and the others only smiled at Ma Yujie's words. They did not take it to heart. Obviously, they believed that this fatty's words were not reliable. Brother Long sent a message. Jiang Qisheng suddenly took out a communication jade talisman. After looking at it for a while, he said with a strange expression, "Brother Long said that he has dealt with the red-eyed bat. He has found a cave in the deepest part of the canyon. He wants us to go there." What? He really disposed of that red-eyed bat? That guy's strength is really that strong? Xingjing turned pale with fright as he spoke. "Don't be so surprised. That guy's strength is unimaginable. Let's go to the deepest part of the canyon first." Ma Yujie shrugged. He did not care about the shock of Jiang Qisheng and the others. He took the lead and rushed into the depths of the canyon. Jiang Qisheng and the others hesitated for a while before following him. When they reached the stone pillar in the deepest part of the canyon and saw the blood-stained red-eyed bat on the pillar, they finally believed the authenticity of Zhuowen's message. The red-eyed bat was really killed. Did Brother Long do all this alone? Jiang Qisheng looked at the corpse of the giant red-eyed bat in front of him and the countless small bat corpses he had seen along the way. He was shocked. He was not the only one who was shocked. Yarou Xiangjuan, Xingjing, and Zhu Kenshin were also shocked. They found it unbelievable. At the same time, they also felt deep respect for Long Wen. They knew that the latter's strength was far beyond their imagination. Long Wen's strength is probably comparable to top geniuses like Zhongli Hao Yang and the Phoenix People's Saintess. Zhu Kenshin smiled bitterly. Everyone else nodded in agreement. Ma Yujie was very calm. He looked at the cave in front of him and said indifferently, "This cave should be the red-eyed bat's nest that Brother Long mentioned in his message. Is the divine herb garden in this cave?" "Yes." Jiang Qisheng nodded. "Then let's go in," Ma Yujie said and rushed into the cave impatiently. Jiang Qisheng and the others were shocked by his eagerness. Was this fatty in such a hurry because he was afraid that Zhuowen would take all the good things inside? Chapter 3002. Allocating the divine herbs. There was a winding tunnel in the cave. In the deepest part of the cave, Zhuowen stopped in a huge open space. The originally dark and gloomy cave became much brighter and warmer when they reached this place. The reason for this was that the open space was open air. Golden sunlight shone down from the outside, causing this open space to be out of tune with the surrounding environment. Is this a formation? Zhuowen looked at the open space shrouded in golden sunlight and slowly stepped inside. Immediately, he felt rich heavenly Tao energy surge into his body. The quality of this heavenly Tao energy was very high. After entering his meridians, he didn't even need to refine it before it became a part of his body. Zhuowen was pleasantly surprised. He could already confirm that this place shrouded in sunlight was a formation. However, this formation was very mysterious and ancient. Zhuowen couldn't tell what level this formation was exactly, but he knew that it shouldn't be low. At the same time, he also noticed that there was a large herb garden at the center of the formation. There were all kinds of divine herbs planted in the garden. Every divine herb had perfect divinity. Flying Cloud Splendor Divine Flower, Celestial Master Yin Divine Lotus, Jade Luna Divine Leaf. Zhuowen looked around the divine herb garden and found that there were no less than 100 divine herbs here. Moreover, all of them were Genesis divine herbs. To be honest, Zhuowen was a little disappointed. He actually had a lot of Genesis divine herbs, but he didn't have many creation divine herbs. He had most of the Genesis grade herbs in the divine medicinal garden with him. Of course, Genesis divine herbs were divine herbs of the third step of Tao validation after all. They were very precious. The more divine herbs of this level, the better. However, Zhuowen didn't immediately pick these divine herbs. Instead, he put his clone into the great world and left his main body sitting cross-legged outside the divine herb garden. He was waiting for Jiang Qisheng and the others to arrive. After all, this place had been discovered by them. He wouldn't go so low as to touch these divine herbs first. After a while, Zhuowen heard footsteps. He knew that Jiang Qisheng and the others had arrived. Ma Yujie was the first to arrive, followed by Jiang Qisheng and Yaro Shangjuan. The first thing they saw was Zhuowen, who was seated cross-legged on the ground, and then they quickly noticed the divine medicinal garden beside Zhuowen. There really is a divine medicinal garden here. Furthermore, this divine medicinal garden is actually filled with Genesis-level divine medicines. This is truly inconceivable. Xingjing was dazzled. Looking at the Genesis-grade divine herbs, her beautiful eyes were filled with longing. Jiang Qisheng, Yaro Shangjuan, and Shu Chenshin were also stunned by the sight of the divine herb garden. This was the first time they had seen so many creation-grade herbs. Ma Yujie glanced sideways at Jiang Qisheng and the others and shrugged with a look of disdain. He thought that these people were simply country bumpkins who were so surprised by a mere Genesis-level elixir. Ma Yujie slowly walked towards the divine medicinal garden and arrived beside Zhuowen. He said indifferently, "Brother Long, it's all because of the two of us that your friends were saved and were able to reach this place. We can split the divine medicinal garden equally." Jiang Qisheng and the others glared at him. If it was Long Wen who had suggested this, they naturally wouldn't have objected. However, this fatty hadn't helped at all. It was Long Wen who had killed the red-eyed bat, yet this fatty was shamelessly asking for an equal share of the divine medicinal garden. Zhuowen glanced sideways at Ma Yujie and said indifferently, "Brother Ma, perhaps you're old and blind. I was the one who killed the red-eyed bat, and I was the one who discovered this divine medicinal garden. What does it have to do with you?" Ma Yujie did not feel awkward at all. He pointed at Jiang Qixing and the others and said, "Brother Long, I helped you protect the four of them. If it weren't for me, how could the four of them be unscathed right now?" Jiang Qixing and the others glared at him furiously. This fatty was just too good at bullshitting. Even without this fatty, Zhuowen would have been able to keep the red-eyed bat busy, and the four of them would have been able to retreat easily. Alright, there's no need to argue. I've already thought about the distribution of the divine medicinal garden. We'll just split it equally between the 6 of us. Also, haven't you realized that the most precious thing in this place isn't the divine medicinal garden, but the formation around it? Zhuowen stood up and said slowly. Ma Yujie frowned, but he did not refute. It was not worth it to fall out with Zhuowen over a mere Genesis-level elixir. After all, he had come here to cooperate with Zhuowen in order to obtain Gonggong's physical body. Jiang Qixing and the others were pleasantly surprised. It was all thanks to Zhuowen that they were able to reach this place. If Zhuowen wanted to take the entire divine medicinal garden, they would not have any complaints. But now, Zhuowen wanted to split it equally with them. To them, this was simply a gift from the heavens. This formation can actually provide such pure heavenly Tao energy, and the climate it creates is the best environment for elixirs to grow. This formation is probably specially used to cultivate this divine medicinal garden. Speaking of which, this kind of formation that is specially used to cultivate elixirs is generally not very popular. Very few divine formation masters learn this kind of formation. I didn't expect to see it here. Ma Yujie walked into the formation and felt the endless heavenly Tao energy coming from the formation. A trace of surprise appeared in his eyes. Jiang Qixing and the others naturally followed him in. They were all excited. The heavenly Tao energy here was probably tens of thousands of times more than outside. Cultivating here for a year was probably equivalent to cultivating for tens of thousands of years outside. Let's distribute the elixirs first. After that, we will cultivate here for a period of time before leaving, Zhuowen said. Ma Yujie was rather hesitant. He was impatient to head to where Gonggong's physical body was stored. He did not want to waste any time here. Brother Ma, you don't have to be in such a hurry. This gear zone is very big. Getting out of this zone isn't something that can be done in a short period of time. While we cultivate here, we can analyze the images on your body. Our chances of finding the true exit will be greater. It's much better than exploring aimlessly outside. Zhuowen's voice rang out in Ma Yujie's head. Ma Yujie thought for a while before reluctantly accepting Zhuowen's suggestion in the end. Next, the 6 of them divided the elixirs in the divine medicinal garden equally. They each found a place to cultivate and absorb the heavenly Tao energy that was so dense that it delighted them. Chapter 3003. Breaking Through to the Eternal Overlord Realm. Zhuowen's absorption of the heavenly law energy was huge. The boundless heavenly law energy around him formed one energy storm after another. It was extremely violent. Fortunately, the place Zhuowen chose was a relatively remote place within the array formation. Otherwise, such a huge commotion would definitely affect the cultivation of others. Even so, Zhuowen's momentum frightened Jiang Qixing and the others. They all opened their eyes and stared at Zhuowen, dumbfounded. Heavens, Brother Long is simply a freak. He's clearly just the Lord of Profound Secrets, so why is he absorbing so much heavenly law energy? Jiang Qixing exclaimed in surprise. Brother Long isn't an ordinary person. The Lord of Profound Secrets already has such terrifying strength, so it shouldn't be a big deal that his cultivation is so loud. Although Yarou Xiangjuan was shocked, she could still accept it. Xing Jing and Shu Chenshin gulped inwardly, looking at Zhuowen with even more reverence. Ma Yujie, on the other hand, glanced at Zhuowen, curled his lips, and muttered, "This fatty can't be suppressed by this guy's momentum." As he spoke, small vortexes appeared one after another around Ma Yujie. Soon after, countless vortexes produced an endless suction force that swallowed the surrounding heavenly law energy. In an instant, the momentum created by Ma Yujie was no weaker than Zhuowen's. Jiang Qixing and the others were even more dumbfounded. This fatty's cultivation momentum was so terrifying that they were truly shocked. But soon, the four of them thought of something. Since this fatty could become Long Wen's friend, he was probably a genius on the same level as him. Thinking of this, Jiang Qixing and the others didn't dare to underestimate this fatty. Let's cultivate too. The heavenly law energy in this formation is limited. Let's try to absorb as much as possible and use it to break through to the next realm. Jiang Qixing came back to his senses and hurriedly said this. Then, he began to cultivate meticulously. Now was not the time to be in a daze. Zhuo Wen and Ma Yujie were simply freaks. With their speed, it would not take long for them to absorb all the heavenly energy in this place. Then, they would be left with nothing to eat. If he didn't seize the opportunity to cultivate now, wouldn't it be a waste of this opportunity? Time passed by, and in the blink of an eye, 10 days had passed. On this day, the sound of something shattering could be heard from within the formation. At this moment, the heavenly energy within the formation was much thinner than before. Catcher. The array had completely collapsed, and the rich heavenly energy in the area had also completely disappeared. The moment the formation collapsed, a vast and majestic energy soared into the sky. Jiang Qixing and the others suddenly stood up. Their eyes were full of joy. In the past 10 days, they had gained a lot. They had all advanced a small realm and their strength had skyrocketed. But soon, they were attracted by the terrifying energy. Their gazes landed on where Zhuowen was. Is Brother Long about to break through? Jiang Qixing and the others murmured in low voices and slowly retreated a distance. After all, the momentum of Zhuowen's breakthrough was so great that they felt their breathing become unsteady. Ma Yujie's eyes flickered and he also moved to the side, silently watching Zhuowen break through. Bang bang bang! Zhuowen's aura grew more and more terrifying. In the sky, the heavenly Tao sent down many strange phenomena, each of which was shocking enough to make ghosts and gods weep. What a terrifying phenomenon! Is this really the phenomenon of advancing to the eternal overlord realm? Why do I feel that the phenomenon produced by Brother Long's breakthrough is even more terrifying than that of a creator? Jiang Qixing stared at the phenomenon in the sky, and all of them were dumbstruck. They felt that it was inconceivable because this phenomenon was simply too terrifying. Even though they were all gods of creation, they couldn't muster up the slightest bit of resistance. However, Zhuowen was strolling leisurely, directly resisting the heavenly Tao phenomena under their incredulous gazes. Although Zhuowen was repeatedly blasted into the ground by the phenomena, Zhuowen climbed up from the ground again and again to face the even more terrifying phenomena. It was as if he had infinite energy. When the last phenomenon descended, Zhuowen's entire chest was pierced through with a wound several feet wide. The injury was extremely serious. They all thought that Zhuowen wouldn't be able to withstand the last phenomenon, but to their surprise, Zhuowen's wound healed rapidly, and he even withstood the last phenomenon. Bang! Zhuowen descended from the sky, his entire body emitting a dazzling radiance, as if he was made of glass. An unprecedentedly powerful aura burst forth from his body, as if the heavens and earth were condensed within him. Zhuowen's lips curved into a smile. He'd finally successfully advanced to the eternal overlord realm. There were 3 minor realms in the second step of the Tao proving realm: the Master of Destiny, the Master of Mystery, and the Eternal Overlord. His original body had stayed at the Master of Mysteries realm for a long time. Now that he was in the gear zone, he finally broke through again and entered the Eternal Overlord realm by coincidence. Because his original body was born without a Tao root, it was heaven-defying and went against the principles of the Tao-proving realm. Therefore, his original body's combat strength couldn't be measured by the Eternal Overlord realm alone. Even if his original body's strength couldn't compare to the creator of the first realm of the third step of the Tao-proving realm, he was already invincible in the Eternal Overlord realm. Even a half-step creator might not necessarily be a match for his original body. Although Zhuowen's current strength mainly came from the Pangu sacred body cultivated by his clone, Zhuowen still loved his original body the most. After all, he was originally a human. His clone had taken over the infant Devour and grown into King Devour. Finally, he fused with the ancestral voodoo insect to form the current Pangu sacred body. Although his clone was powerful, It more or less had Pangu's shadow in it. It had grown so quickly with the help of Pangu's inheritance. But his original body was different. He went against the heavens and cultivated step by step. Just from the time he cultivated, his original body could be called a top genius in the Xianmi heavenly domain for being able to reach the eternal overlord realm so quickly. And his original body didn't have a Dao root. He was even more talented than top geniuses like Zhongli, Hao Yang, and Yi Chidong. Brother Long, congratulations. You've successfully broken through to the eternal overlord realm. Ma Yujie cupped his hands at Zhuowen, a meaningful look in his eyes. Zhuowen glanced at Ma Yujie and found that the latter was sizing him up with a thoughtful look. He was slightly moved. Did this fatty see something? Jiang Qixing and the other three also came to Zhuowen and congratulated him. Their faces were filled with joy. They were sincerely happy for Zhuowen's breakthrough. All right, Brother Ma and I plan to go to the place where Gong Gong's body is stored. I wonder if you'd like to come with us? Zhuowen suddenly asked. Xingjing hesitated for a moment, then cupped his hands at Zhuowen and said apologetically, Brother Shu and I were separated from our fellow disciples when we entered this place. So, we plan to find our fellow disciples first, then go to the place where Gong Gong's body is stored together. Xingchen Shen nodded. Clearly, he and Xingjing had already discussed this beforehand. Since you two have other matters to attend to, I won't keep you any longer. Be careful along the way, Zhuowen said cautiously. Chapter 3004. Grouping. Watching Xingjing and Shu Chenshen leave, Zhuowen turned around and looked at Yaro Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing. Jiang Qixing chuckled and said, Brother Long, as you know, my brothers and sisters have all been killed by that damned Yi Hanfei, so I don't need to look for them. Now that I'm all alone, I plan to follow you. Although Yaro Xiangjuan didn't say anything, she looked at Zhuowen with determination. Zhuowen knew that Yaro Xiangjuan's decision was the same as Jiang Qixing's. If that's the case, then you too will follow me. Zhuowen nodded, but Ma Yujie's expression didn't look too good. Didn't he say that it would be just the two of them? Why did he bring Yaro Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing along? However, Ma Yujie didn't say anything. He had spent some time with Zhuowen, so he had some understanding of the latter's personality. He knew that once Zhuowen decided on something, he wouldn't change his mind easily. Even if he objected, it would be a waste of effort. Zhuowen looked at Ma Yujie and asked, Brother Ma, I see that you've also been studying the root of this gear zone. Are you confident that you can leave this zone? Ma Yujie snorted and said, among the cultivators who entered the door of darkness, except for Zhongli Hao Yang, Yi Chidong, the Phoenix People's Saintess, and a few other top geniuses who didn't accept my talismans, everyone else basically accepted them. During this period, 1/3 of the images have disappeared, while the remaining 2/3 are intact. However, the directions shown in these images are obviously wrong. After eliminating these wrong directions, I have carefully selected 2 directions. One of these 2 directions must be the correct direction. Speaking of this, Ma Yujie took out a map from his spirit ring. This map could be simulated. The map Ma Yujie took out was blank, so he probably hadn't drawn a specific map and direction yet. Ma Yujie formed a seal with his right hand and began to draw a specific map on the map. Soon, Ma Yujie drew a rough map. He handed the map to Zhuowen and said, This is the rough topographic map of the gear zone that I have drawn after many days of observation. Zhuowen took the map and looked at it. He found that there were many red crosses on the map. There was no need for Ma Yujie to explain the markings. Zhuowen also knew that these places were impassable and dangerous. One of them was the canyon where Zhuowen and the others were at. Ma Yujie had also marked this place with a red cross. Among the many red crosses, there were 2 green marks that were rather conspicuous. Are these the 2 directions that you said might be the correct ones? Zhuowen asked as he pointed at the 2 green markings on the map. Yes, I'm in a dilemma now. Which one should I go to first? Or should we split up? Ma Yujie frowned. Let's split up. It'll be more efficient that way, Zhuowen said calmly. Ma Yujie glanced at Zhuowen and hesitated. In the end, he pointed at Yaro Xiangjuan and said, We can split up, but this beautiful girl has to come with me. Yarrow Xiangjuan's pretty face changed slightly. She was very smart, so she naturally knew that Ma Yujie wanted to use her as a hostage to restrict Zhuowen. Ma Yujie was very smart. Since one of the two directions was the correct one, then if Zhuowen found the correct one, Zhuowen would be able to monopolize Gong Gong's body without telling him that it was the correct one. Even if Ma Yujie found Gong Gong's body, he would still have to rely on Zhuowen. When the time came, he would have to inform Zhuowen. Therefore, splitting up would only bring Ma Yujie more harm than good. However, Ma Yujie knew that Zhuowen was a loyal and righteous person. If Yarrow Xiangjuan was in his hands, even if Zhuowen found the real passageway, he would definitely not dare to not inform Ma Yujie. Otherwise, Yarrow Xiangjuan would be doomed. Sure enough, as soon as Ma Yujie made this suggestion, Zhuowen's face turned ugly. "Brother Ma, don't you trust me?" Zhuowen said coldly. Ma Yujie naturally denied it and said with a smile, "Is there strength in numbers? There are 4 of us here, so it's best to split into 2 groups. When the time comes, whoever finds the correct one only needs to send a message to the other to gather." Zhuowen said coldly, "There's no need to split up. Let's move together. We'll just choose a direction and go directly." Zhuowen knew what Ma Yujie was afraid of, so he flatly refused Ma Yujie's request. "It's best if we can move together," Ma Yujie said with a smile. "Brother Long, let's split up. If we move together, if we choose the wrong direction, we have to go to another place again. It's too much of a waste of time," Yarrow Xiangjuan suddenly said. "Junior sister Yarrow, what do you mean?" Zhuowen glanced at Yarrow Xiangjuan. "I'll be in a group with Brother Ma. We'll split up. Once we find the right direction, we'll immediately send a message to the other party," Yarrow Xiangjuan said. "Haha, junior sister Yarrow is reasonable and considers the overall situation," Ma Yujie said with a smile. "If that's the case, let's split up." Zhuowen no longer hesitated. He refused before because he thought that Yarrow Xiangjuan was unwilling. Since Yarrow Xiangjuan was willing to be in a group with Ma Yujie, he naturally had no reason to object. Although Ma Yujie usually looked very unreliable, he was very trustworthy and would not go back on his words. Zhuowen was not worried about Yarrow Xiangjuan following Ma Yujie. After dividing into groups, the 2 groups each chose a marker and left the canyon. The 2 green markers were in completely opposite directions, so the 2 groups separated as soon as they left the canyon. Zhuowen and Jiang Qisheng traveled all the way. They had Ma Yujie's copy of the map in their hands and knew most of the dangerous places in the gear area, so it was very easy for them to travel. Under a red gear, Zhuowen and Jiang Qisheng stopped and looked at the red gear floating in the air in confusion. "The green marker on the map is here, but it seems that there's only this red gear here. There's nothing else." Jiang Qisheng looked around and said. Jiang Qisheng said in a deep voice after he looked around and confirmed that there was nothing else. "Wait," Zhuowen suddenly said. He came to a void under the red gear and immediately stretched out his right hand. Above his right hand, a powerful space-time force lingered. Zhuowen's right hand directly entered the void. Immediately after, Zhuowen made a grasping motion. Suddenly, the void seemed to reverse and suddenly shattered, revealing a void passage. Chapter 3005. Sure, our usual Wen's gaze wasn't very good, and he said, "This passageway was concealed by someone, and it was even set up from the inside out. In other words, someone entered this passageway before us." Jiang Qisheng was startled. "Then let's go in quickly. If this is really the entrance to where Gonggong's body is stored, someone else has gotten there before us." Zhuowen nodded. Just as he was about to enter the passage, several streaks of light shot toward them from afar. Zhuowen's gaze fell on the streaks of light and saw that they were 3 human cultivators. However, their eyes were filled with indignation and their expressions were disheveled, as if they were fleeing for their lives. At the same time, Zhuowen also noticed that a dozen streaks of black light were shooting toward them from behind. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. He discovered that the streaks of black light were actually foreign races. "These foreign races are chasing us human cultivators?" Jiang Qisheng also saw this scene and couldn't help but reveal a look of surprise. He was surprised because the human race and the foreign races had reached an agreement. As long as the alliance hadn't been broken, neither side was allowed to attack. Now that these foreign races had joined forces to catch up to the 3 injured human cultivators, Jiang Qisheng's anger soared. The 3 human cultivators were 2 men and 1 woman. Suddenly, the older middle-aged man who had fallen behind shouted, "Luo Shi, Wu Jian, hurry up and leave. I'll help you stall these foreign races." As he spoke, the middle-aged man formed a sword seal with both hands. The divine sword on his back was suddenly unsheathed. Shortly after, it split into swordlights one after another in the void. They were like resplendent stars that shone brightly in the void. Immediately, the middle-aged man's entire body emitted a blazing blood-red light. The sword lights also glowed with blood-red light, and their aura suddenly became much stronger. "Senior brother." The remaining young man and woman looked at the middle-aged man who was burning his blood essence with sorrow. "Remember, when you leave the door of darkness, tell the house master to avenge us." The middle-aged man muttered, and then like a moth darting into a flame, he flashed out explosively and collided with the group of xenorace experts. The young man and woman clearly knew that this opportunity was given to them by the middle-aged man with his life. They could not let it go to waste. They activated the flying divine artifact beneath their feet and transformed into a stream of light as they continued to flee. Burning his essence blood, the middle-aged man burst forth with a terrifying amount of power. To think that he would be able to fend off the attacks of dozens of foreign beings single-handedly. However, judging from the middle-aged man's increasingly weak aura, Zhuoan knew that the man wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. "I want to help him." Jiang Qisheng could no longer sit still and wanted to fly out, but he was stopped by Zhuoan. "Brother Jiang, it's already too late. This person has already burned his blood essence and is in a state where he won't rest until he's dead. Even if we save him, he won't be able to survive. Moreover, we are quite a distance away from them. By the time you rush over, the battle will have already ended." Zhuoan shook his head. Jiang Qisheng fell silent, but his gaze soon landed on the fleeing man and woman. The void around the flying divine artifact that the man and woman were on suddenly distorted, and it was as if time and space had frozen at this moment. The flying artifact beneath the man and woman's feet suddenly came to a halt, and the man and woman's faces were filled with terror and panic. "Hehe, do you think you can escape? My little toy." A mocking voice sounded from the void. Above the man and woman, there was a young man in purple robes with his hands clasped behind his back as he looked down at the young man and woman who had been imprisoned by time and space. This purple-robed man's skin was very fair, and there were fine purple scales on both sides of his face. His purple eyes exuded a mysterious light. The power of time and space. This person is the prodigy of the space-time beast race, Shao Yu. Jiang Qisheng's expression became very unsightly the instant he saw the man and woman use the power of time and space to imprison them. Although this Shao Yu wasn't the most powerful prodigy of the space-time beast race and was even weaker than Moses and the Phoenix people, his cultivation base was still at the late stage of the God of Creation stage, and his battle prowess was probably not weaker than Sauron's. He was a very difficult opponent to deal with. Zhuoan could see that the man and woman were both at the early stage of the God of Creation stage, but because they had suffered heavy injuries, they couldn't unleash their full strength, which was why they were so easily immobilized by Shao Yu. "It's over." On the flying divine artifact, the young man and woman's eyes were filled with despair. They knew that they were doomed. Even at their peak, they weren't a match for Shao Yu, let alone now when they weren't even in their peak condition. "You guys keep running." A cruel smile appeared on Shao Yu's face as he looked down at the immobilized young man and woman, his eyes filled with mockery. "Ah!" Suddenly, a miserable cry sounded from the distance. The young man and woman's expressions changed drastically as they saw the middle-aged man who had burned his blood essence to help them stall the alien race. He had died from exhaustion after being pierced through by an alien race's spear. "Senior brother." The young man and woman wailed, their eyes filled with sorrow. The alien race's entire body was covered in scales. It was most likely a merman, and it held the middle-aged man's corpse in its right hand. The merman cackled, revealing a hint of cruelty. With a twist of its right hand, it was about to crush the middle-aged man's corpse when a streak of bloody light suddenly shot over and entered its body. Splat! The merman screamed and exploded into a cloud of blood mist. The corpse of the middle-aged man who had been pierced by the spear was caught by a figure. Two ants actually dare to interfere. In the distance, Shao Yu's scarlet gaze landed on Zhuowen, who was hovering in the void with a divine bow in his hand. His expression was very unfriendly. He had long since noticed Zhuowen and Jiang Qisheng, but Zhuowen's aura was far too weak. He was only an eternal overlord, so he didn't care at all. Jiang Qisheng, on the other hand, had attracted his attention. After all, Jiang Qisheng's cultivation had improved quite a bit. He was already a mid-stage Genesis overlord, and was even stronger than the young man and woman. Even so, Shao Yu didn't take him seriously. He was a late-stage god of creation, and he was also from the spacetime beast tribe. Killing late-stage god of creation cultivators from the human tribe was a piece of cake for him, let alone a mere mid-stage god of creation cultivator. However, the eternal overlord that he didn't care about was actually holding a divine bow and shooting out a divine arrow that easily killed the merman. Although the merman wasn't very strong, he was still an early-stage Genesis overlord. His physical body was powerful, and he wouldn't be killed so easily. This person's divine arrow could easily tear through the merman's physical defenses. It was truly unbelievable. However, Shao Yu quickly realized that the divine bow in Zhuowen's hand was not ordinary. Whoosh! In just a few breaths of time, 10 non-humankind beings were killed, and the remaining 4 were finally terrified. They no longer dashed towards Zhuowen. Although they were already very close to Zhuowen, they didn't dare to approach him. This human was too perverted. He actually shot out one divine arrow after another, killing their companions. Was he still human? With a wave of his sleeve, Zhuowen collected the 10 divine arrows that were scattered in the distance. Then, he quickly shot out 4 more arrows, and the 4 fleeing non-humankind beings were all killed. This process was simply too short. Jiang Qisheng had just settled down the middle-aged man's corpse, and Shao Yu had just finished flexing. He hadn't even recovered from his daze yet, and the dozen or so non-humankind beings had been killed just like that. Although Jiang Qisheng knew that Zhuowen was very powerful, he was still stunned by this scene. It was truly inconceivable that he had killed more than a dozen Genesis realm early-stage non-humankind beings in just a few breaths of time. Shao Yu was stunned for a moment, and then he flew into a rage. Human, you've got guts. How dare you kill non-humankind beings? Idiot! Why didn't you think about this when you killed my human race? You killed my human race, so I killed your non-humankind. Isn't that right and proper? Zhuowen mocked. Shao Yu's eyes flashed. He didn't immediately charge forward to attack Zhuowen. Instead, he looked at the divine bow in Zhuowen's hand with apprehension. He could sense that this human had been able to kill those non-humankind beings in such a short time mainly because of this strange divine bow. Otherwise, with this human's cultivation, he wouldn't even be able to kill a single non-humankind being. Shao Yu's guess was right. Zhuowen was indeed relying on the Huyi divine bow. After all, his cultivation base was only at the eternal overlord realm. Even if his main body's strength was extraordinary, he could at most fight an early-stage Genesis realm expert. Against a dozen non-humankind beings of that level, his main body wouldn't be able to handle at all. Moreover, Zhuowen didn't even need to use the Huyi divine bow to kill these non-humankind beings. He only needed to use ordinary Genesis realm divine arrows to completely annihilate these non-humankind beings. Human, what else can you do apart from relying on the divine bow in your hand? If you have the guts, put away that divine bow and fight me one-on-one. How about that? Shao Yu suddenly said. One-on-one? You really don't have the right to fight me one-on-one, Zhuowen sneered. He picked up a Genesis realm divine arrow and pulled the bowstring. Instantly, the divine arrow burst forth with sky-piercing killing intent and shot toward Shao Yu. Shao Yu's pupils shrank to the size of needles when he sensed the terrifying killing intent on the divine arrow. Poochie. The palm exploded into a bloody mist. Soon after, Shao Yu's blood-curdling screams rang out from the void. In space-time, Shao Yu clutched his shattered right palm and his eyes were full of shock and uncertainty. He felt that the human seemed to have seen through the trajectory of his attack, which was why he had shot the arrow in advance. But how was this possible? Ordinary humans didn't understand the power of spacetime at all and naturally couldn't see the trajectory of his spacetime power. However, the humans seemed to have seen through it. This was too unbelievable. Shao Yu couldn't believe it. Seeing that the young man and woman were about to approach Zhuowen, Shao Yu snorted and attacked again. He subconsciously felt that the human was definitely lucky to have shot him before. This time, the guy wouldn't be so lucky again. Chapter 3007. Shao Yu's Death. Shao Yu screamed and immediately used the spacetime ability to enter the spacetime tunnel. He no longer dared to attack, but looked in horror at the young man with the divine bow not far away. How is this possible? Did this guy see through the trajectory of my spacetime travel? Shao Yu trembled all over, clutching his right arm that had exploded. His right arm was almost blown to smithereens and was now recovering very slowly. As one of the top 10 races of the primitive heaven realm, the spacetime beast race, his physical recovery ability was very terrifying. If it were any other time, the injury on his right arm would have healed in the blink of an eye, but at this moment, the flesh on his right arm was wriggling with difficulty and recovering very slowly. It could be said to be the speed of a turtle. Shao Yu's face was very gloomy. He knew that the slow recovery of his injury must have something to do with the divine arrow shot by the human. The divine arrow was filled with an extremely terrifying killing intent. It was earth-shattering and caused the sun and moon to dim. The moment the divine arrow pierced his right arm, the terrifying killing intent on the surface of the divine arrow penetrated deep into his flesh and blood, hindering his physical recovery. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! Shao Yu was flustered and exasperated. In the spacetime tunnel, he stared at Zhuowen, not daring to move rashly. If this human didn't rely on that strange divine arrow, I wouldn't be in such a sorry state. Damn human, damn ant. Shao Yu cursed, but he still didn't dare to go out. He was frightened by Zhuowen's strange archery. At this moment, the young man and woman had already come to Zhuowen and Jiang Qixing's side. After confirming that they were safe, the two of them sighed and hurriedly cupped their fists to Zhuowen in gratitude. Don't say anything first. Let me deal with that cowardly little snake first. Zhuowen waved his hand to stop the young man and woman from saying any words of gratitude. Instead, he glanced at the surrounding void. The young man and woman were startled and hurriedly nodded. Shao Yu was now a great enemy and they could not let their guard down. Brother, that Shao Yu is a genius of the spacetime beast race. He's naturally adept at the power of spacetime. His strength might not be as terrifying as the merman race's Moses or the Phoenix people's Saintus, but his ability to escape is top-notch. If he were to escape, none of us would be able to catch up to him. Perhaps the sand dwarf has already escaped. Unfortunately, Zhuowen didn't pay any attention to her. Instead, he continued to observe the surroundings and spread out his divine sense. Zhuowen had a certain amount of spacetime power. Although he couldn't compare to the sand dwarf, he could still see some clues. He knew that the sand dwarf hadn't left. He was hiding in a nearby spacetime and watching. Once he relaxed, the sand dwarf would launch a thunderous attack, and they would suffer a calamity. Bang bang bang. Suddenly, several attacks swept out from the void. Each attack came from a completely different direction. Zhuowen formed a seal with his right hand and used the light of creation to envelop Jiang Qixing and the others, blocking the sand dwarf's attack in time. This sand dwarf is really insidious. He doesn't dare to face us head-on, but uses underhanded moves. Jiang Qixing looked at the sand dwarf's attack and said angrily. As soon as Jiang Qixing finished speaking, more intensive attacks swept out from the void, all of which were the sand dwarf's underhanded moves. Zhuoan stood in place and formed a seal with both hands to maintain the defense of the light of creation, while his divine sense extended further and further. The surrounding spacetime veins were really too complicated. Although Zhuoan's divine sense was many times stronger than that of ordinary cultivators, it was still extremely difficult for him to figure out the surrounding spacetime veins. Trying to find the specific location of the sand dwarf in these complicated spacetime veins was simply like searching for sand. Fortunately, Zhuoan had mastered the power of spacetime. Using the combination of his divine sense and the power of spacetime, it wasn't that difficult for him to find the sand dwarf. Bang! 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 The sand dwarf's attacks became fiercer and fiercer. Sometimes, terrifying attacks blasted out from 10 directions at the same time, landing on the light of creation, causing the surface of the light of creation to tremble violently. Jiang Qixing and the others looked at the light of creation that was on the verge of collapse with worry in their eyes. They were afraid that the light of creation would shatter. Bang! 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 After another wave of intensive attacks, the light of creation became slightly dimmer. The light of creation had withstood hundreds of attacks from beginning to end. The sand dwarf was also full of energy. How could he use so many attacks in such a short period of time? Did he not feel tired? Jiang Qixing's eyes were full of worry. He couldn't help but look at Zhuoan, who had his eyes closed and seemed to be calculating something. He said softly, "Brother Zhuo, we can't continue like this. We'll be exhausted to death." As soon as Jiang Qixing finished speaking, a shattering sound came from the creation mysterious light and it immediately shattered into countless fine powder. The young man and woman cried out in alarm, their eyes filled with horror. Even Jiang Qixing showed a look of fear. At this moment, Zhuoan had already opened his eyes. He swiftly withdrew an arrow and suddenly pulled the bowstring to a full moon. After that, the arrow shot out with a swish, flying through the air and charging into the depths of space. At this moment, the sand dwarf narrowed his eyes in a spacetime tunnel deep in space. When he saw the light of creation shatter in the end, he threw his head back and laughed loudly. His eyes were cruel. "Human, it's time to end you." "Hee hee." The sand dwarf snickered. He suddenly struck out with his right hand, instantly launching several attacks. The attacks passed through the spacetime tunnel and shot out in several directions. However, as soon as the attacks shot out, Zhuoan had already shot out an arrow. The divine arrow shot through the air and accurately passed through the attacks, obliterating them completely. After obliterating the attacks, the arrow's momentum did not decrease. It continued to rush into the void and into countless spacetime tunnels before finally arriving at the spacetime tunnel where the sand dwarf was. The sand dwarf's pupils shrank. He hurriedly retreated. At the same time, he took out ink-black crystals from his spirit ring. The moment these ink-black crystals were thrown out, they actually exploded one after another. The explosive energy that spread out was extremely terrifying and frightening. After Sand Dwarf threw out nearly 100 ink-black crystals, the arrow was finally blocked. Moreover, the arrow fell and dimmed. Seeing that the arrow was blocked and destroyed, the Sand Dwarf breathed a sigh of relief. He was really frightened by the arrow that carried terrifying killing intent. The arrow was only a Genesis divine weapon. He did not care. What he was most afraid of was the killing intent on the arrow. The terror of the killing intent far exceeded the grade of the arrow itself. If he was hit by the arrow, the killing intent would invade his body and he would definitely die. The moment the Sand Dwarf breathed a sigh of relief, his expression changed drastically. This was because he felt an even more terrifying killing intent locking onto him. Chapter 3008. Luo Shi and Wu Jianpuqi. Sha Yu only had the time to turn around before his entire body flew backwards. An arrow had completely penetrated his chest. Horrifying fresh blood spurted out, causing Sha Yu to involuntarily cry out in pain. He could clearly feel that his flesh and blood had been pulverized by the killing intent, and even his spirit was deeply affected. Sha Yu was terrified. He desperately urged the energy in his body to resist the terrifying killing intent. Unfortunately, all his efforts were in vain. In the end, He screamed and exploded into a cloud of blood mist, transforming into a huge body. Shoryu was a spacetime beast. His body was a huge divine snake that lay across the spacetime tunnel. Zhuowen stood in the void. After he shot the second arrow, he knew that Shoryu was doomed. He instructed Jiang Qisheng, then operated the spacetime force and disappeared into the spacetime tunnel in the depths of the void. Jiang Qisheng and the other two looked at each other, wondering why Zhuowen had left. Shoryu's attack seems to have stopped. Could it be that fellow Daoist's arrow killed Shoryu? The young female cultivator asked cautiously. It should be. Jiang Qisheng nodded. The young man and woman looked at each other in shock. They knew how terrifying Shoryu was, and in the situation just now, Shoryu had directly escaped into the spacetime tunnel. It was basically impossible to capture Shoryu's location. If it were them, even if they used their divine sense for a lifetime, they would not be able to find Shoryu's specific location. But the scarred young man only spent about a quarter of an hour to find Shoryu's location and accurately shot 2 arrows to kill Shoryu. Maybe Shoryu was injured and fled far away. The young male cultivator still could not accept this fact and said hesitantly. However, as soon as he finished speaking, he immediately shut his mouth. This was because he saw a huge corpse of a divine snake being thrown out from the depths of the void ahead. Zhuowen was following closely behind the corpse of the divine snake. This is the body of a spacetime beast. It seems to be Shoryu's corpse. He really killed the Sandaryu. The young female cultivator covered her cherry lips and said, I heard that spacetime beasts are born with the ability to use spacetime energy. This is because when spacetime beasts are born, they will produce a crystal called spacetime crystal. Brother Zhuo, I see that you have also mastered the power of spacetime. The spacetime crystal should be of some use to you. Jiang Qisheng transmitted his voice to Zhuowen. Zhuowen was startled and immediately stopped on Shoryu's corpse. His divine sense began to sweep over Shoryu's corpse inch by inch. Soon, he found a sparkling and translucent crystal at 7 inches of Shoryu's corpse. He knew that this crystal should be the spacetime crystal that Jiang Qisheng had mentioned. Zhuowen arrived at Shoryu's 7 inches away. Using his right hand as a blade, he sliced across Shoryu's abdomen. Then, his hand reached inside and grabbed a crystal that was flickering with black light. He could feel the powerful spacetime energy contained within the crystal. What a rich spacetime energy! No wonder the spacetime beasts can master the power of spacetime at birth. They don't even need to comprehend it. It's all because of the spacetime crystal. Zhuowen looked at the spacetime crystal for a while and began to try to absorb it. He was surprised to find that the spacetime energy in the spacetime crystal could be easily absorbed into his body and spread to his 8 extraordinary meridians. Zhuowen's eyes lit up and he began to use the devouring power to quickly devour the spacetime energy in the spacetime crystal. Half a day later, the spacetime crystal in Zhuowen's hand completely shattered and the spacetime energy in it was completely absorbed by Zhuowen. Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes, which were filled with enlightenment. After absorbing this spacetime crystal, his understanding of spacetime energy had deepened and he was much more proficient in using it than before. If he used the spacetime energy again, his body movement would be more agile than before and he would be able to shuttle through the spacetime tunnel like a fish in water. Not only that, if he used his self-created divine ability, the Destiny Spacetime Kill, its power would be even more terrifying and incomparable to before. Zhuowen did not use the Destiny Spacetime Kill to test its power. This divine ability was also his trump card and he did not want to expose it in front of Jiang Qisheng and the others. Although the current power of this divine ability might not be as strong as the Huyi Divine Bow and the Yama Ghost Portrait. However, Zhuowen knew that this was something he had created himself, and it had limitless potential. As he grew stronger, his understanding of fate and spacetime would become more thorough, and the power of the fate spacetime annihilation would naturally become even more terrifying. Brother Jiang, when I absorbed the spacetime crystal just now, I gained some enlightenment. I've kept him waiting for a long time. Zhuowen smiled apologetically at Jiang Qisheng. Jiang Qisheng waved his hand and said, Brother Long, you're too polite. It's only half a day. Compared to you saving our lives, it's nothing. Luo Shi and Wu Jian greet Brother Long. Thank you for your help this time. Otherwise, we might have been buried in the hands of the foreign races. The young man and woman hurriedly came in front of Zhuowen and respectfully bowed. Zhuowen nodded. Although he did not mention his name to the two, Jiang Qisheng should have mentioned it to them when he was absorbing the spacetime crystal. Therefore, he was not surprised that the two knew his name. May I know which sect you two are from? Zhuowen asked. They are from the Scarlet Heaven Sword Tower, Jiang Qisheng replied. Scarlet Heaven Sword Tower? Zhuowen was startled and immediately nodded without saying anything. Zhuowen was very unfamiliar with the Scarlet Heaven Sword Tower. The only impression he had was that he had met the Scarlet Heaven Sword Tower's Tower Master, Xiong Puyu, in front of the Gate of Darkness. Previously, when he fought against Mda, Xiong Puyu was also a witness like Sen Qiyin. Zhuowen's impression of him was neither good nor bad. Speaking of which, the Scarlet Heaven Sword Tower was the strongest Dao Palace force in the Western Dao domain. Zhuowen knew that the strongest genius of the Scarlet Heaven Sword Tower was called Sichu Liangji. His strength was not bad. Zhuowen had seen Sichu Liangji on the Universal Contribution ranking. He was ranked 4th, only below Yi Hanfei. Although the middle-aged man who saved Luo Shi and Wu Jian's cultivation was not bad, he was only a mid-stage Genesis Lord. He should not be Sichu Liangji. Right, the strongest genius of your Scarlet Heaven Sword Tower should be Sichu Liangji, right? I remember that he also entered the Gate of Darkness. Why didn't he go with you? Zhuowen asked casually. Luo Shi and Wu Jian smiled bitterly and said, Senior brother Sichu, senior sister Zhongli, and senior brother Yi Chidong joined hands to explore the way out of this place. They separated from us long ago. After we parted ways with senior brother Sichu, we went to look for our fellow disciples of the Scarlet Heaven Sword Tower. We wanted to gather our fellow disciples. But on the way, we discovered that the foreign races were wantonly chasing after our human race. We also fought with the foreign races. After killing some of them, we encountered the sand race and were chased by them all the way here. Chapter 3009. A shameless alien race. These outsiders are really arrogant. Oh right, is this sure are you the one who initiated this hunt? Asked Zhuowen coldly. Luo Shi shook his head and said, Not sure are you, but Moses of the Mermaid clan. Sure are you is just an accomplice. Apart from Sure are you, Moses has also joined forces with Hu Ben of the Black Tiger clan and Leng Bai of the Dragon clan. He has gathered almost all the other races and divided them into several teams to hunt down the humans who enter the Gear Zone. Speaking up to that point, Luo Shi was so angry that her petite body was trembling, obviously infuriated by Moses' actions. This Moses is really bold. He actually has bad intentions. As soon as he entered this place, he joined forces with the other races to kill us humans. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and a murderous look flashed across his eyes. He continued, So the Saint of the Phoenix people has also joined? No, the Saintess of the Phoenix people was focused on Ancestor Gonggong. She didn't pay any attention to us humans at all. I don't think it has anything to do with the Saintess of the Phoenix people. However, we can't completely rule out the suspicion. After all, Moses and the Saintess of the Phoenix people are very close. Maybe the Saintess had something to do with it, Wu Jian said. Then do you know how many squads there are? If it's possible, I don't mind wiping them all out, Zhuowen said coldly. Originally, Zhuowen didn't want to meddle in other people's business. However, these foreign races had gone too far. How dare they betray the human race? Zhuowen couldn't take this lying down. Although he wanted to go to where Gonggong's body was, he was not in a hurry. His main goal in entering the Door of Darkness was Gonggong's GU worms. He had already obtained the Gonggong GU worm, his mission was considered complete. Moreover, if he wanted to get the essence blood of the ancestor sorcerer, he would have to rely on the Pangu sacred body. Right now, the clone was concentrating on fusing with Gonggong's GU worms in the Great World. There was still some time before the fusion was complete. In other words, if the clone had not broken through, even if Zhuowen came to Gonggong's body, It would not be easy to extract his essence blood. He might as well make use of this time to get rid of these treacherous foreign races. By then, his clone might have completely fused with the Gonggong Gu worm. By then, he would be much more confident. There are a total of 3 teams, and the 3 teams are led by Shou Yu, Hu Ben, and Leng Bai respectively. Among them, the strongest team should be Hu Ben's team. Not only are their overall standards high, that Hu Ben's power is even stronger than Shou Yu's, second only to Mosa's. Luo, she said in a deep voice. Shou Yu has been annihilated by us. His team has also been annihilated. In other words, there are only 2 teams left. And didn't Moses lead a team? Zhuowen asked doubtfully. Although Moses was the instigator, he did not really take part in it. He was just following the sacred lady of the Phoenix people to search for an exit to leave this place. Luo, she continued to say. Do you know the locations of the other 2 teams? Zhuowen looked at Luo Shi and asked. Luo Shi revealed a look of excitement and quickly said, I know. The foreign race team is especially arrogant. They did not hide their tracks at all. As long as they encounter a human, they will immediately attack and destroy them. After that, they will take all the valuables from the human cultivators. And now, most of the human cultivators have joined forces and contacted each other through the communication Jade Talisman to determine the location of the foreign race team so that they can move and hide in advance. Zhuowen shook his head inwardly. These humans were too cowardly. They were actually hiding from the foreign race team. Did they not intend to join forces to fight against the foreign race team? Luo, she saw the meaning in Zhuowen's expression and said in a deep voice, the overall standard of the human race is much lower than the foreign race. In addition, some people have an innate fear of the foreign race. Although there were a few people who wanted to join forces to fight against the foreign race, there were not many people who responded. Zhuowen nodded and did not delve into the details. Instead, he said to Luo Shi, junior sister Luo Shi, please contact the others and provide us with the location of Leng Bai's team. We will take care of Leng Bai's team first. Luo Shi quickly nodded and took out the communication Jade Talisman to start contacting the others. Soon, there was a reply. Luo Shi looked at it and told Zhuowen the specific location of Leng Bai's team. It's not far from here. Let's go and meet Leng Bai. Zhuowen looked around and the corners of his mouth curled up in a smile. He took the lead and flew in the direction of Leng Bai. Under a green gear, there was an area of mountains. On one of the mountain peaks, a man was carefully observing a group of foreign race members who were patrolling around in the distance. At the same time, he used the communication Jade Talisman to send a message. After doing this, he immediately entered an inconspicuous cave not far away. There was another person in the cave. It was a graceful woman with good looks. If Zhuowen was here, he would definitely recognize that this woman was Xingjing, who he had just parted with not long ago. As for the man sneaking back into the cave, he was Xu Chenshen. Brother Xu, what did you go out to do just now? Xingjing asked curiously. Junior sister Luo Shi of the Scarlet Heaven Sword Tower sent a message to the group and provided her with the specific location of Leng Bai's team. Isn't Leng Bai near here? So I sent the location to junior sister Luo Shi. Xu Chenshen said. Why does he want the location of Leng Bai's team? Is he planning to find us? Xingjing frowned and shook her head. She felt that the message sent by Luo Shi was a little strange. I'm not sure either. Since junior sister Luo Shi wants it, I will naturally help if I can, Xu Chenshen said with a smile. Xingjing nodded and said unhappily, I thought we would be able to find our fellow disciples. I didn't expect that most of our fellow disciples would be killed by the foreign races. These foreign races are really despicable. They actually went back on their word and attacked our human race at this time. Xu Chenshen smiled bitterly and said, the foreign races can't be trusted, but I didn't expect them to be shameless to this extent. Ari, if we hadn't parted ways with Long Wen and followed him, perhaps we wouldn't have to hide in this cave like this. Xingjing fell silent. Ever since Zhuowen had easily destroyed the red-eyed bats in the canyon, they had looked at Zhuowen in a new light and knew that Zhuowen was much stronger than them. Following such a powerhouse was indeed the best choice for them. Unfortunately, they had already parted ways with Zhuoan and were now trapped here, not daring to go out. Even if they wanted to hug his leg, they couldn't. Hey! There are fluctuations of battle. It's very strong and is close to us. Could it be that Lung Bai's team is fighting with someone? Chapter 30:10. Lung Bai Xingjing also stood up, her beautiful eyes looking at Shu Chen Shun with a serious look, her eyes filled with confusion. During this period of time, the foreign races had been very strong, the human race had been suppressed and forced to hide. After all, the top geniuses of the human race were busy exploring the place where Gong Gong's body was stored and did not pay attention to the foreign races suppressing the human race. It could be said that the human race lacked a true leader to lead the human race against the foreign races. In Xingjing's opinion, Lung Bai's team had been loitering around here for some time. Whenever a human appeared, Lung Bai's team would kill them with lightning speed. Moreover, Lung Bai seemed to know that there were many humans hiding here. He did not leave at all. Instead, he carried out a thorough search. During this period of time, he found many humans hiding here and killed all of them. Xingjing and Shu Chen Shun had been avoiding Lung Bai's search and had been in a state of fear all this time. In their opinion, Lung Bai's team was too terrifying. Even if the two of them joined forces, they were far from being a match. If they were found by Lung Bai's team, they would not even have a chance to escape. Now that they had sensed powerful battle fluctuations, they quickly thought of Lung Bai's team. Moreover, the battle fluctuations were far stronger than before. Could it be that Lung Bai's team had encountered a powerful opponent? Junior Xingjing, you sent Junior Luo Shi the specific location of Lung Bai's team, right? Shu Chen Shun asked. Xingjing nodded, then thought of something and said, could it be that Junior Luo Shi and the others are fighting against Lung Bai's team? Shu Chen Shun shook his head and said, if Junior Luo Shi was with Sichu Liangji, she would have the strength to fight against Lung Bai's team. But as far as I know, Sichu Liangji should be with Zhong Li, Hao Yang and Yi Qidong. It is unlikely that he would turn back to look for Junior Luo Shi. Then who could it be? To be able to cause such a huge fluctuation, it must be a difficult opponent for Lung Bai's team to deal with. Let's go take a look. Shu Chen Shun's eyes flashed, a little tempted to go take a look. Xingjing revealed a hesitant expression. Her beautiful eyes flickered as she said in a low voice, Senior Brother Shu, you know better than me how strong the cold defeat team is. If we go out, there will be a huge risk of being exposed. Let's be careful. I can feel that the battle over there is becoming more and more terrifying. I think that Lung Bai will not notice us. Shu Chen Shun's eyes shone brightly, but he was determined to go out and take a look. Xingjing was helpless and could only say, then let's try our best to be careful. Don't get too close to that battle. Next, Shu Chen Shun and Xingjing tiptoed out of their hiding place. Thousands of miles away from where they were hiding, there was a rather remote valley. At this moment, Lung Bai's expression was ugly as he watched the members of his team die one by one. Right now, Lung Bai was in the form of a human. However, his cheeks were filled with golden dragon scales. At the same time, there was a gigantic dragon tail growing out from his back. Originally, Lung Bai was leading a group of cultivators to patrol the area and search for humans hiding in this area. His harvest was quite good. He found quite a few humans hiding in this area. Naturally, he cruelly killed them all. Just now, he happened to find a few humans hiding in a very inconspicuous cave. Just as he ordered a few of his subordinates to capture them, a divine arrow pierced through their bodies and exploded into clouds of blood. Following that, another 2 divine arrows shot out of the void. The 3 divine arrows intertwined together, transforming into a cloud-like astral wind that shot into the ranks of the outsiders and began a massacre. The divine arrows were simply too sharp. The moment the outsiders in the group came into contact with them, they were pierced through without being able to resist at all. They couldn't be more dead. Seeing the number of outsiders in the group dwindling, Lung Bai knew that he couldn't just sit idly by and watch. He had to stop these divine arrows. At the same time, Lung Bai was very wary of the person shooting the arrows in the dark. A cultivator who could shoot such divine arrows had to be someone with terrifying strength. Roar. Lung Bai let out a long roar. His human form instantly exploded and turned into a huge dragon that seemed to be able to crush the entire sky. This giant dragon was covered in golden scales that emitted a terrifying golden light. Especially its pair of sharp golden eyes that were filled with a terrifying chill. Lung Bai was a golden dragon of the dragon tribe. His bloodline was much more superior than the average dragon. His talent was also extremely powerful. Lung Bai's cold gaze focused on the divine arrows that were wreaking havoc in the group. The golden dragon scales on his body emitted a blinding golden light. Then, the golden light seemed to have materialized and left the dragon scales. It whizzed out and turned into a golden rain. The golden rain seemed to have a mind of its own. It avoided the outsiders and landed on the 3 divine arrows that were wreaking havoc. Bang! 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 The sound of rain hitting banana leaves could be heard. Under the bombardment of the golden rain, the divine arrows actually started to waver. Their forward momentum also slowed down. The outsiders who were being ravaged by the divine arrows heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly retreated behind Lung Bai. Lung Bai looked at the few outsiders who had retreated behind him. His expression was very ugly. There were more than 50 outsiders in the group that he was leading. Now, there were only a dozen or so gathered behind him. Moreover, all of them were severely injured. Lung Bai knew that if he had taken action a step later, the dozen or so outsiders would have been buried by the raging divine arrows. Who is it? Get the hell out here. Lung Bai's expression was gloomy. He shouted into the void. His voice was as loud as a bell, echoing continuously. Xing Jing and Shu Chen Shun, who had been secretly observing from their hiding places, were instantly shocked by this loud shout. Xing Jing actually lost his balance and accidentally bumped into a small rock beside his feet. The small rock fell from the cliff and made a soft sound. Although the sound was not loud, Lung Bai was not an ordinary person. He immediately noticed the sound from Xing Jing's side.